Hi everyone, welcome back. I know it's been a while, but we are going to be tackling Constantine P. Cavafy. For those of you who were kind of hoping that the history stuff would continue, it will, but Andrew Jackson and American coups in Latin America are heavy subjects that are going to take a while for me to tackle. So we are going back to Constantine P. Cavafy. I know I've covered a lot of his stuff before, but I'm basically going to put everything in this one video or one reading. Um, what I'm reading out of is the revised edition of his works that was edited by George Savadis, translated by Edmund Keeley and Philip Sherrard, and published by Princeton Paperbacks. So, be, so since I'm going to put everything I can in this one reading, I do need to preface stuff with this. Constantine P. Cavafy was a Greek man or a Greek descended man living in Alexandria, Egypt when the British took over. He spent a lot of his time as a bureaucrat in the British controlled Egypt and very much grew up in the traditions of of the Greek Orthodox Church and or at least Greek influence. Um, but he was also a man who cared very much about the classics, and that really shows with how much he wrote either about the Hellenistic world or post Hellenistic world and the Roman order. He also wrote a lot about um, being gay and homoerotic poetry. With this in mind, we do need to understand that a lot of these poems are going to be homoerotic, and if you don't like that, unfortunately, that's just the poetry, so take it or leave it. And also, this is my channel, so do with that as you will. So, with that out of the way, we are going to start with his published works from 1896 to 1932. This is going to be most of everything we have, but we do have some of his unpublished works, and that will be at the end. Number 1, Walls. With no consideration, no pity, no shame, they have built walls around me, thick and high, and now I sit here feeling hopeless. I can't think of anything else. This fate gnaws my mind. Because I had so much to do outside, when they were building the walls, how could I not have noticed? But I never heard the builders, not a sound. Imperceptibly, they have closed me off from the outside world. Number 2, An Old Man. At the noisy end of the cafe, head bent over the table, an old man sits alone, a newspaper in front of him. And in the miserable banality of old age, he thinks how little he enjoyed the years, when he had strength, eloquence, and looks. He knows he's aged a lot. He sees it, feels it. Yet it seems he was young just yesterday. So brief an interval, so very brief, and he thinks of Prudence, how it fooled him, how he always believed, what madness, that cheat who said, "Tomorrow you have plenty of time." He remembers impulses brittled, the joy he sacrificed. Every chance he lost now mocks his senseless caution. But so much thinking, so much remembering makes the old man dizzy. He falls asleep, his head resting on the cafe table. Number 3. The Horses of Achilles. When they saw Patroclus dead, so brave and strong, so young, the horses of Achilles began to weep. Their mortal nature was upset deeply by this work of death they had to look at. They reared their heads, tossed their long manes, beat the ground with their hoofs, and mourned. Patroclus, seeing him lifeless, destroyed, now mere flesh only, his spirit gone, defenseless, without breath, turned back from life to the great nothingness. Zeus saw the tears of these immortal horses and felt sorry. At the wedding of Peleus, he said, I should not have acted so thoughtlessly. Bear if we hadn't given you as a gift, my unhappy horses. What business did you have down there? Among pathetic human beings, the toys of fate. You are free of death, you will not get old, yet ephemeral disasters torment you. Men have caught you up in their misery, but it was for the eternal disaster of death that those two gallant horses shed their tears. Next is prayer. The sea engulfed a sailor in its depths. Unaware, his mother goes and lights a tall candle before the icon of Our Lady, praying for him to come back quickly for the weather to be good. Her ear cocked always to the wind, while she prays and supplicates, the icon listens solemn, sad, knowing the son she waits for will never come back. The funeral of Sarpedon. Zeus mourns deeply. Patroclus has killed Sarpedon. Now Patroclus and the Achaeans rush forward to snatch up the body to dishonor it. But Zeus does not tolerate that at all. Though he lets his favorite child be killed, this the law required, he will at least honor him after death. So he now sends Apollo down to the plain with instructions about how the body should be tended. Apollo reverently raises the hero's body and carries it in sorrow to the river. He washes the dust and blood away, heals its terrible wound so no trace of it is left, pours perfume of ambrosia over it, and dresses it in radiant Olympian robes. He bleaches the skin and with a pearl comb combs out the jet black hair. He spreads and arranges the beautiful limbs. Now he looks like a young king, a royal charioteer. 25 or 26 years old, resting himself after winning the prize in a famous race. His chariot all gold and his horses the fastest. Having finished his task this way, Apollo calls for the two brothers, Sleep and Death, and orders them to take the body to Lycia, the rich country. So the two brothers, Sleep and Death, set off on foot towards the rich country Lycia. And when they reached the door of the king's palace and handed over the honored body, and then returned to their other labors and concerns, and once the body was received in the palace, the sad burial began, with processions and honors and dirges, while many libations from sacred vessels, with all pomp and circumstance. Then skilled workers from the city and celebrate craftsmen and stone came to make the tombstone and the tomb. Candles. Days to come stand in front of us like a row of lighted candles, golden, warm, and vivid candles. Days gone by fall behind us, a gloomy line of snuffed out candles. The nearest are smoking still, cold, melted, and bent. I don't want to look at them. Their shape saddens me, and saddens me to remember their original light. I look ahead at my lighted candles. I don't want to turn for fear of seeing, terrified, how quickly the dark line gets longer, how quickly the snuffed out candles proliferate. The first step. The young poet Evenus complained one day to Theocritus, I have been writing for 2 years now, and I have composed just one idyll. It's my only completed work. I see sadly that the ladder of poetry is tall, extremely tall. And from this first step I now stand on, I will never climb any higher. Theocritus replied, words like that are improper and blasphemous. Just to be on the first step should make you happy and proud. To have come this far is no small achievement. What you have done is a glorious thing. Even this first step is a long way above the ordinary world. To stand on this step, you must be in your own right a member of the city of ideas, and it is a hard, unusual thing to be enrolled as a citizen of that city. Its councils are full of legislatures no charlatans can fool. To have come this far is no small achievement. What you have done is already a glorious thing. The souls of old men. Inside their worn, tattered bodies dwell the souls of old men. How unhappy the poor things are, and how bored by the pathetic life they live. How they tremble for fear of losing that life, and how much they love it, those befuddled and contradictory souls sitting, half comic and half tragic, inside their old, threadbare skins. Chafes il gran refuto. For some people, the day comes when they have to declare the great yes or the great no. It's clear at once who has the yes ready within him and saying it. He goes forward in honor and self-assurance. He who refuses does not repent. Asked again, and he would still say no. Yet that no, the right no, undermines him all his life. Interruption. Hasty and awkward creatures of the moment, it is we who interrupt the actions of the gods. In the palaces of Elysius and Pythia, Demeter and Thetis initiate rituals over high flames and heavy smoke. But Metaneira always bursts in from the royal quarters, hair loose, terrified, and Peleus, scared, always intervenes. The windows. In those dark rooms where I live out empty days, I circle back and forth, trying to find the windows. It will be a great relief when a windows opens, but the windows are not there to be found, or at least I cannot find them. And perhaps it is better that I don't find them. Perhaps the light will prove another tyranny. Who knows what new things it will expose. Thermopylae. Honor to those who in the life they lead define and guard a Thermopylae. Never betraying what is right, consistent and just in all they do, but showing pity also and compassion, generous when they are rich and when they are poor, still generous in small ways, still helping as much as they can, always speaking the truth, yet without hating those who lie. And even more honor is due them, and when they foresee, as many do foresee, that in the end Ephialtes will make his appearance, that the Medes will break through after all. Unfaithfulness. At the marriage of Thetis and Peleus, Apollo stood up during the sumptuous wedding feast and blessed the bridal pair. For the son who would come from their union, sickness will never visit him, he said, and his life will be a long one. This pleased Thetis immensely. The words of Apollo, expert in prophecies, seemed to guarantee the security of her child, and when Achilles grew up and his beauty was the boast of Thessaly, Thetis remembered the god's words. But one day elders arrived with news that Achilles had been killed at Troy. Thetis tore her purple robes, pulled off her rings, her bracelets, and flung them to the ground, and in her grief recalling that wedding scene, she asked what the wise Apollo was up to. Where was this poet who holds forth so eloquently at banquets? Where was his prophet when they killed her son in his prime? And the elders answered that Apollo himself had gone down to Troy and together with the Trojans had killed her son. Waiting for the barbarians. What are we waiting for assembled in the forum? The barbarians are due here today. Why isn't anything happening in the Senate? Why do the senators sit there without legislating? Because the barbarians are coming today. What law can the senators make now? Once the barbarians are here, they'll do the legislating. Why did our emperor get up so early? And why is he sitting at the city main gate? On his throne in state wearing the crown. Because the barbarians are coming today and the emperor is waiting to receive their leader. He has even prepared a scroll to give him, replete with titles with imposing names. Why have our two consuls and praetors come out today, wearing their scarlet togas? Why have they put on bracelets with so many amethysts and rings sparkling with magnificent emeralds? Why are they carrying out elegant canes beautiful worked in silver and gold? Because the barbarians are coming today, and things like that dazzle the barbarians. Why don't our distinguished orators come forward as usual to make their speeches, say what they have to say? Because the barbarians are coming today, and because they are bored by rhetoric and public speaking. Why this sudden restlessness, this confusion? How serious people's faces have become. Why are the streets and squares emptying so rapidly? Everyone's going home so lost in thought. Because night have fallen and the barbarians have not come, and some who have just returned from the border say, there are no barbarians any longer, and now what's going to happen to us without barbarians? They were, those people, a kind of solution. Voices. Voices loved and idolized, of those who have died or of those lost for us like the dead. Sometimes they speak to us in dreams, sometimes deep in thought the mind hears them, and with their sound for a moment return, sounds from our life's first poetry, like music at night distant, fading away. Longings. Like the beautiful bodies of those who died before they had aged, sadly shut away in sumptuous mausoleum. Roses by the head, jasmine at the feet. So appear the longings that have passed without being satisfied. Not one of them granted a night of sensual pleasure, or one of its radiant mornings. Trojans. Our effort are those of the men prone to disaster. Our efforts are like those of the Trojans. We just begin to get somewhere, gain a little confidence, grow almost bold and hopeful. When something always comes to stop us, Achilles leaps out of the trenches in front of us and terrifies us with his violent shouting. Our efforts are like those of the Trojans. We think we'll change our luck by being resolute and daring, so we move outside ready to fight. But when the great crisis comes, our boldness and resolution vanish, our spirit falters paralyzed. And we scurry around the walls trying to save ourselves by running away. Yet we are sure to fail. Up there, high on the walls, the dirge has already begun. They are mourning the memory, the aura of our days. Priam and Hecuba mourn for us bitterly. King Demetrius. When the Macedonians deserted him and showed they preferred Pyrrhus, King Demetrius, a noble soul, didn't behave, so they said, at all like a king. He took off his golden robes, threw away his purple buskins, and quickly dressing himself in simple clothes, he slipped out just like an actor who, the play over, changes his costume and goes away. The retinue of Dionysus. Damon, the craftsman, none better in the Peloponnese, is giving the last touches to his retinue of Dionysus. Carved in Parian marble, the god leading in divine glory, with the power in his stride, after him, and temperance and beside, and temperance, intoxication, pours out the satyr's wine, from the amphora wreathed in ivory. Near them, sweet wine, the delicate, eyes half closed, soporific, and behind come the singers, tune maker and melody and reveler, the last holding the honored processional torch, which he never lets die. And then ceremony so modest, Damon carves all of these, and as he works, his thoughts turn now and then to the fee he's going to receive from the king of Syracuse. 3 talents, a large sum. Adding this to what he has already, he'll live grandly from now on, like a rich man. And think of it, he'll be able to go into politics, he too in the Senate, he too in the Agora. Monotony. One monotonous day follows another equally monotonous. The same things will happen again and then will happen again. The same moments will come and go. A month passes by and brings another month. Easy to guess what lies ahead. All the yesterdays, boredom, and tomorrows end up no longer like tomorrow. The footsteps. Eagles of coral adorn the ebony bed, where Nero lies fast asleep, callous, peaceful, happy. In the prime of his body's strength and the fine vigor of youth. But in the alabaster hall that holds the ancient shrine of the Aneberbe. How restless the household gods! They tremble the little layers and try to hide their insignificant bodies. They've heard a terrible sound, a deadly sound coming up the stairs. Iron footsteps that shake the staircase. And now, faint with fear, the miserable layers scramble to the back of the shrine, shoving each other, stumbling, one low god falling over another because they know what kind of sound that is. Know by now the footsteps of the Furies. That's the man. Unknown, a stranger in Antioch, the man from Edessa, writes and writes, and at last there the final canto's done that makes 83 poems in all, but so much writing, so much versifying, the intense strain of phrasing in Greek has worn the poet out, and now everything weighs down on him. But a thought suddenly brings him out of his dejection, the sublime, "That's the man," which Lucian once heard in his sleep. The city. You said I'll go to another country, go to another shore, find another city better than this one. Whatever I try to do is fated to turn out wrong, and my heart lies buried as though it was something dead. How long can I let myself molder in this place? Wherever I turn, wherever I happen to look, I see the black ruins of my life here, where I've spent so many years, wasted them, destroyed them totally. You won't find a new country, won't find another shore. This city will always pursue you. You will walk the same streets, grow old in the same neighborhoods, will turn gray in the same houses. You will always end up in the sea. Don't hope for things elsewhere. There is no ship for you, there is no road. As you've wasted your life here in this small corner, you destroyed it everywhere else in the world. The satrapy. Too bad that, cut out as you are, for grand and noble acts, this unfair fate of yours never offers encouragement, always denies you success. That cheap habits get in your way, pettiness and indifference. And how terrible the days you give in, the days you let go and give in, and take the road for Susa and go to King Artaxerxes, who well disposed, gives you a place at his court and offers you satrapies, and things like that. Things you don't want at all. Though in despair you accept them just the same. You long for something else, aches for other things. Praise from the demos and the sophists, that hard won, the priceless acclaim, the agora, the theater, the crown of laurels. You can't get any of these from Artaxerxes. You'll never find any of these in the satrapy, and without them, what kind of life will you live? The Ides of March. Guard, O my soul, against pomp and glory, and if you cannot curb your ambitions, at least pursue them hesitantly, cautiously, and the higher you go, the more searching and careful you need to be. And when you reach your summit, Caesar at last, when you assume the role of someone that famous, then be especially careful as you go out into the street. A conspicuous man of power with your retinue, and should a certain Artemidorus come up to you out of the crowd bringing a letter, and say hurriedly, read this one at once. There are things in it important for you to see. Be sure to stop, be sure to postpone all talk or business, be sure to brush off all those who salute, and bow to you. They can be seen later. Let even the Senate itself wait and find out immediately what grave message Artemidorus has for you. Things ended. Possessed by fear and suspicion, mind agitated, eyes alarmed, we desperately invent ways out, plan how to find the inevitable danger that threatens us so terribly. Yet we are mistaken. That not the danger ahead, the information was false. Or we didn't hear or didn't get it right. Another disaster. One we never imagined suddenly, violently descended upon us, and finding us unprepared, there is no time left, sweep us away. Sculptor of Tiana. As you have heard, I'm no beginner. I've handled a lot of stone in my time, and in my own country, Tiana. I'm pretty well known. Actually, senators here have also commissioned a number of statues from me. Let me show you a few of them. Notice this Rhea, reverently all fortitude very old. Notice Pompey and Marius here, and Paulus Aemilius, and Scipio Africanus. The likeness as close as I can make it, and Patroclus, I still have to touch him up a bit. Near those pieces of yellowish marble here stands Caesarion, and here some time now I've been busy working on a Poseidon. I'm studying his horses in particular, how to shape them exactly. They have to be made so light, and it's clear their bodies, their legs, are not touching the earth but galloping over water. But here's my favorite work, wrought with utmost care and feeling. This one, it was a summer day, very hot, and my mind rose to idle things. This one came to me in a vision, this young Hermes. The god abandons Anthony. When suddenly at midnight you hear an invisible procession going by with exquisite music, voices, don't mourn your luck that's failing now. Work's gone wrong, your plans all proving deceptive. Don't mourn them uselessly, as one long prepared and graced with courage. Say goodbye to her, the Alexandria that is leaving. Above all, don't fool yourself. Don't say it was a dream, your ears deceived you. Don't degrade yourself with empty hopes like these. As one long prepared and graced with courage, as is right for you, who were given this kind of city, go firmly to the window and listen with deep emotion, but not with the whining, the pleas of cowards. Listen, your final delegation to the voices, to the exquisite music of that strange procession, and say goodbye to her, to the Alexandria you are losing. Ionic. That we've broken their statues, that we've driven them out of their temples doesn't mean at all the gods are dead. O land of Ionia, they are still in love with you. Their souls will keep your memory. When an August dawn wakes over you, your atmosphere is potent with their life. And sometimes a young ethereal figure, indistinct in rapid flight, wings across your hills. The glory of the Ptolemies. I'm Lagid's king absolute master. Through my power and wealth of sensual pleasure, there's no Macedonian, no barbarian equal to me, or even approaching me. The son of Seleucus is really a joke with his cheap lechery. But if you are looking for other things, note this too, my city, the great his preceptor, queen of the Greek world, genius of all knowledge of every art. Ithaca. As you sail for Ithaca, hope the voyage is a long one, full of adventure, full of discovery. Lastrygonians and Cyclops, angry Poseidon, don't be afraid of them. You'll never find things like that on your way, as long as you keep your thoughts raised high, as long as a rare excitement stirs your spirit and your body. Lastrygonians and Cyclops, wild Poseidon, you won't encounter them unless you bring them along inside your soul, unless your soul sets them in front of you. Hope the voyage is a long one. May there be many a summer morning when, with what pleasure, what joy, you come into harbor scene for the first time. May you stop at Phoenician trading stations to buy fine things, mother of pearl and coral, amber and ebony, sensual perfume of every kind, as many sensual perfumes as you can, and may you visit many Egyptian cities to gather stories of knowledge from their scholars. Keep Ithaca always in your mind. Arriving there is what you are destined for, but do not hurry the journey at all. Bear if it lasts for years, so you are old by the time when you reach the island, wealthy with all you have gained on the way, not expecting Ithaca to make you rich. Ithaca gave you the marvelous journey. Without her, you would not have set out. She has nothing left to give you now. And if you find her poor, Ithaca won't have fooled you, wise as you will have become, soul full of experience, you will have understood by then what these Ithacas mean. Dangerous thoughts. Said Myrtus, a Syrian student in Alexandria during the reign of Emperor Constans and the Emperor Constantius, in part a heathen, in part Christianized. Strengthened by study and reflection, I won't fear my passion like a coward. I'll give my body to sensual pleasures, to enjoyments. I dreamed of the audacious erotic desires, to the lascivious impulses of my blood, and with no fear at all, because when I wish, and I'll have the willpower strengthened, as I shall be by study and reflection, when I wish at critical moments, I will recover my spirit aesthetic as it was before. Fill-in. Make sure the engraving is done skillfully. The expression serious, majestic, the diadem preferably somewhat narrow. I don't like that broad kind of Parthian wear, the inscription as usual in Greek. Nothing excessive, nothing pompous. We don't want the proconsul to take it the wrong way. He's always nosing things out and reporting back to Rome. But of course, giving me due honor, something very special on the other side. Some discus thrower, young, good-looking. Above all, I urge you to see to it. Sypathus, for God's sake, don't let them forget that after King and Savior, they engrave Philon, and elegant characters. Now don't try to be clever with your where are the Greeks and what things Greek here behind Zagros, Apion, Ferrata. Since so many other more barbarians than ourselves choose to inscribe it, we will inscribe it too, and besides, don't forget that sometimes sophists do come to us from Syria, and versifiers and other triflers of that kind, so we are not, I think, un-Greek. Herodes Atticus. What glory this for Herodes Atticus, Alexander of Cephalaci. one of our good sophists. On reaching Athens to lecture, find the city deserted because Herodas was in the countryside, and all the young men had followed him there to hear him. This makes Sophist Alexander write Herodas a letter, begging him to send the Greeks back, and the tactful Herodas answers at once, "Along with the Greeks, I'm coming too." How many young men now in Alexandria, in Antioch, or in Beirut, being trained by Hellenism as its future orators, meeting at their choice banquets, where the talk is sometimes about fine sophistry, sometimes about their exquisite love affairs, are suddenly distracted and fall silent, their glasses untouched in front of them. They think about Herodas' good fortune. What other sophist has been given this kind of honor? Whatever his wish, whatever he does, the Greeks follow him, not to criticize or debate, not even to choose any longer, only to follow. Alexandrian kings. The Alexandrians turn out in force to see Cleopatra's children, Caesarion and his little brothers, Alexander and Ptolemy, who for the first time have been taken out to the gymnasium, to be proclaimed kings there, before a brilliant array of soldiers. Alexander, they declared him, king of Armenia, Media, and the Parthians. Ptolemy, they declare him king of Sicilia, Syria, and Phoenicia. Caesarion was standing in front of the others dressed in pink silk. On his chest a bunch of hyacinthus, spelled a double row of amethysts and sapphires. His shoes tied with white ribbons, pricked with rose-colored pearls. They declare him greater than his little brothers. They declare him king of kings. The Alexandrians knew, of course, that this was all mere words, all theater, but the day was warm and poetic, the sky a pale blue, the Alexandrian gymnasium a complete artistic triumph. The courtiers wonderfully sumptuous, Caesarion all grace and beauty, Cleopatra's son, blood of the legates. And the Alexandrians thronged to the festival, full of enthusiasm, and shouted the acclamations, in Greek and Egyptian and some in Hebrew, charmed by the lovely spectacle, though they knew, of course, what all this was worth. What empty words they really were, these kingships. Come back. Come back and take hold of me. Sensation that I love, come back and take hold of me. When the body's memory awakens and the old longing again moves into the blood, when lips and skin remember, and hands feel as though they touch again. Come back often, take hold of me in the night, when the lips and skin remember. And church. I love the church, its labra, its silver vessels and candle holders. The lights, the icons, the pulpit. Whenever I go there into a church of the Greeks, with its aroma of incense, its liturgical chanting and harmony, the majestic presence of priests dazzling in their ornate vestments, the solemn rhythm of their gestures, my thoughts turn to the great glories of our race, to the splendor of our Byzantine heritage. Very seldom. He's an old man used up and bent, crippled by time and indulgence. He slowly walks along the narrow street, but when he goes inside his house to hide the shambles of his old age, his mind turns to the shorn youth that still belongs to him. His verse is now recited by young men. His visions come before their lively eyes. their healthy, sensual minds, their shapely taut bodies, stirred to his perception of the beautiful as much as you can. And if you can't shape your life the way you want, at least try as much as you can not to degrade it by too much contact with the world, by too much activity and talk. Try not to degrade it by dragging it along, taking it around and exposing it so often to the daily silliness of social events and parties until it comes to seem a boring hanger on. For the shop, he wrapped them up carefully and neatly in expensive green silk, roses of rubies, lilies of pearl, violets of amethyst, beautiful according to his taste, to his desire, his vision, not as he saw them in nature or studied them. He leaves them in the safe, examples of his bold, his skillful work. Whenever a customer comes into the shop, he brings out other things to sell for first class ornaments, bracelets, chains, necklaces, rings. That poem was for the shop. I went. I didn't hold myself back. I gave in completely and went to these delications that were half real, half wrought by my own mind. Went into the brilliant night and drank strong wine, the way the champions of pleasure drink. Tomb of the grammarian Lyceus. In the Beirut Library, just to the right as you go in, we buried wise Lyceus, the grammarian. The spot is beautiful, chosen. We put him near these things of his that he remembers, maybe even their comments, text, grammar, variants, voluminous studies of Greek idioms. Also, this way, as we go back to the books, we'll honor his tomb. Tomb of Evrion. In this tomb, inordly designed, the whole cyanite stone covered by so many violets, so many lilies, lies handsome Evrion, an Alexandrian, 25 years old. On his father's side, he was of old Macedonian stock. On his mother's side, descended from a line of magistrates, he studied philosophy and Aristocletus, rhetoric with Paros and at Thebes. The sacred scriptures he wrote a history of the province of Aristonitis, that at least will survive. But we lost what was really precious, his form, like a vision of Apollo. Chandelier. In a room, empty, small, 4 walls only, covered with green cloth. A beautiful chandelier burns all fire, and in each of its flames a sensual fever. A lascivious urge glows with heat. In the small room, radiantly lit by the chandelier's hot fire, no ordinary light breaks out, not for the timid buys the rapture of this heat. Long ago. I'd like to speak of this memory, but it's so faded now, as nothing is left, because it was so long ago in my early adolescent years. A skin as though of jasmine that August evening. Was it August? I can still just recall the eyes. Blue, I think they were. Ah, yes, blue, a sapphire blue. But the wise perceive things about to happen. Ordinary people know what's happening now. The gods know future things. Because they are totally enlightened of what's to come, the wise perceive things about to happen. Sometimes during moments of intense study, their hearing's troubled. the hidden sound of things approaching, reaching them. And they listen reverently, while in the streets outside the people hear nothing whatsoever. Theotis, if you are one that truly elect, be careful how you attain your eminence. However much you are acclaimed, however much the cities praise the great things you have done in Italy and Thessaly, whatever honors your admirers decree for you in Rome, your elation, your triumph will not last, nor will you feel yourself superior, superior indeed, when Theotis brings you in Alexandria on a blood-stained tray miserable Pompey's head. And do not be too sure that in your life restricted, regulated, prosaic, spectacular, and horrible things like that do not happen. Maybe this very moment Theotis, bodiless, invisible, enters some neighbor's tidy house carrying an equally repulsive head. At the cafe's door. Something they said beside me made me look towards the cafe's door, and I saw that lovely body which seemed as though Eros in his mastery had fashioned it, joyfully shaping it well-formed limbs, molding it tall build, shaping its face tenderly, and leaving with a touch of the fingers a particularly nuance on the brow, the eyes, the lips. He swears every now and then to begin a better life. But when night comes with its own counsel, its own compromises and prospects, when a night comes with its own power of a body that needs and demands, he goes back lost to the same fatal pleasure. One night. The room was cheap and sordid, hidden above the suspect tavern. From the window you could see the alley, dirty and narrow. From below came the voices of workmen, playing cards and enjoying themselves. And there, on that common, humble bed, I had love's body, had these intoxicating lips, red and sensual, red lips of such intoxication that now as I write after so many years in my lonely house, I'm drunk with passion again. Morning Sea. Let me stop here, let me to look at a nature a while. The brilliant blue of the morning sea, of the cloudless sky, the yellow shore, all lovely, all bathed in light. Let me stand here and let me pretend I see all this. I really did see it for a minute when I first stopped, and not my usual daydreams here too, my memories, those images of sensual pleasure. Pictured. My work, I'm very careful about it, and I love it, but today I'm discouraged by how slowly it's going. The days has affected my mood. It's getting darker and darker. Endless wind and rain. I'm more in the mood for looking than for writing. In this picture, I'm now gazing at a handsome boy who is lying down close to a spring, exhausted from running. What a handsome boy, what a heavenly noon, has caught him up in sleep. I sit and gaze like this for a long time, recovering through art from the effort of creating it. Orphanus. The figure on this 4-drachma coin, who seems to have a smile on his face, his beautiful, delicate face, this is Orphanus, son of Erytheus, a child they threw him out of Cappadocia, out of his great ancestral palace, and sent him to grow up in Ionia, to be forgotten there among foreigners. Of those exquisite Ionian nights, what fiercely and entirely in Greek way, he came to know what sensual pleasure totally in his heart, Asiatic always, but in manners and language a Greek, with his turquoise jewelry, his Greek clothes, his body perfumed with oil of jasmine. He was the most handsome, the most perfect of Ionia's handsome young men. Later, when the Syrians entered Cappadocia and made him king, he became fully engrossed in his kingship so as to enjoy himself in a new way each day, greedily hoarding gold and silver, delightedly gloating over the piles of wealth glittering before his eyes. As for worrying about the country and running it, he had no idea what was going on around him. The Cappadocians got rid of him, and he ended up in Syria at the palace of Demetrius. When he spent his time amusing himself and loafing, but one day unfamiliar thoughts broke in his completely idle life. He remembered how through his mother Antiochus and the old grandmother Straconii, he too was connected with the Syrian crown. He too almost a self-kid. For a while he gave up lechery and drink and ineptly half-days tried to start an intrigue. Do something, come up with a plan, but he failed pitifully and was reduced to nothing. His end must have been recorded somewhere only to be lost, or maybe history passed over it, and rightly didn't bother to notice a thing so trivial. The figure on this 4-drachma coin, a trace of whose young charm can still be seen, a ray of his poetic beauty, the sensuous commemoration of an Ionian boy. This is Orphanus, son of Arithius. The Battle of Magnesia. He lost his old fire, his courage. Now his tired, almost decrepit body will be his first concern, and the rest of his life he'll spend without worrying. So Philip says anyway. Tonight he's playing a game with dice. He's in a mood to amuse himself. Cover the table with roses. What if Antiochus was defeated at Magnesia, they say? The bulk of his brilliant army was totally crushed. Maybe they are stretching a bit. It can't all be true. Let's hope so anyway. Because though enemies they do belong to our race. But one let's hope so is enough. Perhaps even too much, of course. Philip won't put off the festivities, however much his life has worn him out. One blessing remains, his memory is still intact. He recalls the extent of their mourning in Syria, the kind of sorrow they felt when Macedonia, their motherland, was smashed to pieces. Let the banquet begin, slaves, the music, the lights. Manuel Comnenus. One dreary September day, Emperor Manuel Comnenus felt his death was near. The court astrologers, bribed of course, went on babbling about how many years he still had to live. But while they were having their say, he remembered an old religious custom, and ordered ecclesiastical vestments to be brought from a monastery, and he put them on, glad to presume, the modest image of a priest or monk. Happy all those who believe and, like Emperor Manuel, ended their lives dressed modestly in their faith. The displeasure of Seleucus. Demetrius Seleucus was displeased to learn that Ptolemy had reached Italy in such a squalid state. Poorly dressed and on foot, with only 3 or 4 slaves. This way their dynasty will become a joke. The laughter of Rome. Self-kids know, of course, that basically they have become something like servants to the Romans. He also knows that the Romans give and take away their thrones arbitrarily, as they please, but they should maintain a certain dignity, at least in their appearance. They should not forget that they are still kings and are still, alas, called kings. This is why Demetrius Selfkids was displeased, and right away he offered Ptolemy purple robes, a magnificent diadem, precious jewels, numerous servants and retainers, his most expensive horses, so that he may present himself at Rome as he should, as an Alexandrian Greek monarch. But Ptolemy, who has become too big, knew his business and refused it all. He didn't have the slightest need for these luxuries. Shabbily dressed humble, he entered Rome, put himself up in the house of a minor artisan, and then he presented himself as a poor ill-fated creature to the Senate in order to make his begging more effective. When they come alive, try to keep them, poet, those erotic visions of yours. However few of them there are that can be stilled. Put them half hidden in your lines. Try to hold them, poet, when they come alive in your mind, and at night or in the brightest of noon, in the street. His attractive face a bit pale, his chestnut eyes looked tired, dazed, 25 years old, but could not be taken for 20, with something of the artist in the way he dresses, the color of his tie, shape of his collar. He drifts aimlessly down the street, as though still hypnotized by the illicit pleasure, the very illicit pleasure that has just been his. Before the statue of Endymion. I have come from Miletus to Latimus, on a white chariot drawn by 4 snow-white mules, all their trappings silver. I sailed from Alexandria in a purple trireme to perform sacred rites, sacrifices and libations in honor of the Endymions. And here's the statue. I now gaze in ecstasy at Endymion's famous beauty. My slaves' empty baskets of jasmine and auspicious tributes revive the pleasure of ancient days. In a town of Osorni, yesterday around midnight they brought us our friend Riemann, who, been wounded in tavern fight, through the windows we left wide open. The moon cast light over his beautiful body as he lay on the bed. We are a mixture here, Syrian, migrated Greeks, Armenians, and Medes. Riemann, too, is one of this kind, but last night, when the moon shone on his sensual face, our thoughts went back to Plato's Charybdis, passing through. The thing he timidly imagined as a schoolboy are openly revealed to him now, and he wanders around, stays out all night, gets involved, and as is right for our kind of art, his blood, fresh and hot, is relished by sensual pleasure. His body is overcome by forbidden erotic ecstasy, and his young limbs give in to it completely. In this way, a simple boy becomes something worth our looking at. For a moment, he too passes through the exalted world of poetry, the young sensualist with blood fresh and hot. For Amonis, who died at 29 in 610. Raphael, they're asking you to write a few lines as an epitaph for the poet Amonis. Something very tasteful and polished. You can do it. You are the one to write something suitable for the poet Amonis, our Amonis. Of course you'll speak about his poems, but say something too about his beauty, about a subtle beauty that we loved. Your Greek is always elegant and musical, but we want all your craftsmanship now. Our sorrow and our love move into foreign language. Pour your Egyptian feeling into the Greek you use. Raphael, your verses, should be written so they contain something of our life within them. So the rhythm, so every phrase clearly shows that Alexandrian is writing about Alexandrian, one of their gods. When one of them moved through the marketplace of Seleucia, just as though it was getting dark, moved like a young man, tall, extremely handsome, with the joy of being immortal in his eyes. With his black and perfumed hair, the people going by would gaze at him, though and one would ask the other if he knew him, if he was a Greek from Syria or a stranger. But some who looked more carefully would understand and step aside, and as he disappeared under the arcades among the shadows and the evening light, going towards the quarter that lives only at night with orgies, debauchery, with every kind of intoxication and desire, they would wonder which of them it could be and for what suspicious pleasure he had come down from the streets of Seleucia, from the august celestial mansions. In the evening, it wouldn't have lasted long anyways. The experience of years make that clear. Even so, fate did put an end to it a bit abruptly. It was soon over, that wonderful life. Yet how strong the scents were, what a magnificent bed we lay in, what pleasure we gave our bodies. An echo from my days given to sensuality, an echo from the days came back to me. Something of the fire of the young life we shared. I picked up a letter again, and I read it over and over till the light faded away. Then sad, I went out to the balcony, went out to change my thoughts, at least by singing something of the city I love. A little movement in the streets and the shops. To sensual pleasure. My life's joys and intense recollection of those hours when I found and captured sensual pleasure as I wanted. My life's joy and sense that I refused all indulgence and routine love affairs. Gray. While looking at a half-gray opal, I remember two lovely gray eyes. It must be 20 years ago I saw them. We were lovers for a month. Then he went away to work, I think, in Smyrna, and we never met again. Those gray eyes will have lost their beauty if he's still alive. That lovely face will have spoiled. Memory keep them the way they were, and memory, whatever of that love you can bring back, whatever you can bring back tonight. Tomb of Isis. Isis lie here, the young man famous for his good looks in this great city. Men of learning admire me, so did simple, superficial people. I took equal pleasure in both, but from being considered so often a Narcissus and Hermes, excess wore me out, killed me. Traveler, if you're Alexandrian, you won't blame me. You know the pace of our life, its fever, its unsurpassable sensuality. In the month of Athir. I just read the inscription on this ancient stone. Lord Jesus Christ, I make a soul in the month of Athir. Lefkoius went to sleep, where his age is mentioned, lived to the age of. The Capizetta show that he went to sleep a young man. In the corroded part, I see him, Alexandrian. Then there are three badly mutilated lines. Though I can pick out a few words like our tears, grief, then tears again, and sorrow to us, his friends. I think Lefkios must have been greatly loved. In the month of Athir, Lefkios went to sleep. I've looked so much. I've looked on beauty so much that my vision overflows with it. The body's lines, red lips, sensual limbs, hair as though stolen from Greek statues, always lovely even uncombed, and falling lightly over pale foreheads, figures of love as my poetries desired them. In the nights when I was young, encouraged secretly in those nights. Tomb of Ignotius. Here I'm not the Cleon famous in Alexandria. Were they not easily dazzled for my marvelous houses, my gardens, for my horses and chariots, for the jewels and silks I wore? Far from it, here I'm not that Cleon. His 28 years are to be wiped out. I'm Ignotius, lector, who came to his senses very late, even so, and that way I lived 10 happy months in the peace, the security of Christ. Days of 1903. I never found them again, all lost so quickly, the poetic eyes, the pale face, and the darkened street. I never found them again, entirely by chance, and so easily given up, then longed for so painfully, the poetic eyes, the pale face, those lips. I never found them again. The window of the tobacco shop. They stood, among many others, close to a lighted tobacco shop window. Their glances met by chance, and timidly, haltingly, expressed the illicit desire of their bodies. Then a few uneasy steps along the street until they smiled and nodded slightly. And after the closed carriage, the sensitive approach of body to body, hands linked, lips meeting. Caesarion. Partly to throw light on a certain period, partly to kill an hour or two. Last night I picked up and read a volume of inscriptions about the Ptolemies. The lavish praise and flattery are much the same for each of them. All are brilliant, glorious, mighty, benevolent. Everything they undertake is full of wisdom. As for the women of their line, the Bernices and Cleopatras, they too, all of them, are marvelous. When I verified the facts I wanted, I would have put the book away and had not a brief insignificant mention of King Caesarion suddenly caught my eye. And there you were with your indefinable charm, because we know so little about you from history. I could fashion you more freely in my mind. I made you good looking and sensitive. My art gives you face a dreamy, unappealing beauty, and so completely did I imagine you that late last night, as my lamp went out, I let it go out on purpose. It seemed you came into my room. It seemed you stood there in front of me, looking just as you would have in Conquer Alexandria, pale and weary, ideal in your grief, still hoping that they might take pity on you, those scum who were whispered, "Too many Caesars." Body remembered. Body remembered not only how much you were loved, not only the beds you lay on, but also those desires that glowed openly, and eyes that looked at you, trembled for you in the voices. Only some chance obstacle frustrated them. Now that it's all finally in the past, it seems almost as if you gave yourself to those desires too. How they glowed, remembered in eyes that looked at you. Remember, body, how they remembered for you in those voices. Tomb of Linus. The Linus you loved, Marcos, isn't here. In this tomb you come to weep by, lingering hours on end, the Linus you loved is closer to you when you're in your room at home and you look at his portrait. The portrait that still keeps something of what was valuable in him, something of what it was you used to love. Remember, Marcos, that time you brought in the famous Crimean painter from the proconsul's palace? What artistic subtlety you used trying to persuade you both the minute he saw your friend, that he absolutely must do him as Heinsius. In that way his portrait would come to be better known. But you, Lanus, didn't hire out his beauty like that, reacting strongly. He told him to portray neither Hyacinthus nor anyone else but Lanus, son of Remicthus, an Alexandrian. Understanding. The years of my youth, my sensual life, how clearly I see their meaning now. How needless the repentance, how futile. But I didn't see the meaning then, in the loose living of my early years. The impulses of my poetry were shaped, the boundaries of my art laid down. That's why the repentance was so fickle, and my resolutions to hold back to change lasted 2 weeks at the most. Nero's deadline. Nero wasn't worried at all when he heard the utterance of the Delphic oracle, "Beware the age of 73. Plenty of time to enjoy himself still. He's 30, the deadline that gods have given him is quite enough to cope with future dangers. Now a little tired, he'll return to Rome, but wonderfully tired from that journey, devoted entirely to pleasure, theaters, garden parties, stadiums, evenings in the cities of Achaia, and above all the sensual delights of naked bodies. So much for Nero, and in Spain Galba secretly musters and drills his army, Galba the old man in his 73rd year. Envoys from Alexandria. For centuries they hadn't seen gifts at Delphi, as wonderful as those sent by the two brothers, the rival Ptolemaic kings, but now they have them. The priests are nervous about the oracle. They'll need all their experience to decide how to express it tactfully. Which of the two brothers like these will have to be offended, and so they meet secretly at night to discuss the family affairs of the legates. But suddenly the envoys are back. They're taking their leave, returning to Alexandria, they say, and they don't ask for an oracle at all. The priests are delighted to hear it. They are to keep the marvelous gifts that goes without saying, but they are also completely bewildered, having no idea what this indifference means. They do not know that yesterday's the envoys had heard serious news. The oracle was pronounced in Rome, but the partition was decided there. Aristobulus. The palace weeps, the king weeps. King Herod grieves inconsolably. The whole town weeps for Aristobulus. Drowned by accident so wastefully while playing in the water with his friends. And when the news spread abroad, when it reached Syria, even many Greeks will be sad. Poets and sculptors will mourn. They heard of Aristobulus. Yet their imagination could never conceive a young man with the beauty of this boy. What statue of a god can Antioch boast to compare with a child of Israel? The first princess, his mother, the leading Hebrew woman, weeps and laments. Alexandra weeps and laments over the tragedy, but the minute she is alone, her lamenting disappears. She howls, rails, swears, curses. How they fooled her, how they cheated her, how they finally had their way, devastating the house of the Hasmoneans. How did he pull it off, that crook of a king, scheming, crafty, vicious? How did he do it, a plot so fiendish that even Mariamne, didn't sense a thing. Had she sensed something, had she suspected, she would have found a way to save her brother. She is a queen, after all. She could have done something. How those spiteful women, Cyprus and Salome, those sluts, Cyprus and Salome, how they'll crow now, gloating in secret, and to be powerless. Forced to pretend she believes their lies. Powerless to go to the people, to go out and shout to the Hebrews to tell them how the murder was carried out. In the harbor town, Emmis, young 28, reached the Syrian harbor in Tenian ship. His plan to learn the incense trade, but ill during the voyage, he died as soon as he was put ashore. His burial, the poorest possible, took place here. A few hours before dying, he whispered something about home, about very old parents, but nobody knew who they were, or what country he called home. And the great pan-Hellenic world, better that way because as it is, though he lies buried in this harbor town, his parents will always have the hope he's still alive. Almnos Manai Alexandrine, AD 628 to 655. Out of talk, appearance, and manner, I will make an excellent suit of armor, and in this way I will face malicious people without feeling the slightest fear of weakness. They will try to injure me, but of those who will come near me none will know where to find my wounds, my vulnerable places, under the deceptions that will cover me. So boasted Aminius Manai. One wonders if he ever made the suit of armor. In any case, he didn't wear it long. At the age of 27, he died in Sicily. Since 9 o'clock. 12:30, time has gone by so quickly. Since 9 o'clock when I lit the lamp and sat down here. I've been sitting without reading, without speaking, completely alone in the house. Whom could I talk to? Since 9 o'clock when I lit the lamp, the shade of my young body has come to haunt me, to remind me of shut scented rooms, of past sensual pleasures. What daring pleasure, and it also brought back to me streets now unrecognizable. Bustling nightclubs now closed, theaters and cafes no longer here. The shade of my young body also brought back to the things that make us sad: family, grief, separation. The feeling of my own people, feelings of the dead so little acknowledged. 12:30, how the time has gone by. 12:30, how the years have gone by. Outside the house. Walking yesterday in an outlying neighborhood, I went by the house I used to go when I was very young. There, Eros, with his magnificent power, had taken a hold of my body. And yesterday, when I walked along the old roads, the shops, the sidewalks, the stones, walls, and balconies, and the windows all were suddenly made beautiful by the spell of love. Nothing ugly was left there. And as soon as I stood gazing at the door, stood there lingering outside the house, my whole being radiated the sensual emotions stored up inside me. The next table. He must be barely 22 years old, yet I'm certain that almost that many years ago I enjoyed the very same body. It isn't erotic fever at all. I've been in the casino for a few minutes only, so I haven't had the time to drink a great deal. I enjoyed that very same body, and if I don't remember where, this one lapse of memory doesn't mean a thing. There, now that he's sitting down at the next table, I recognize every motion he makes. Under his clothes, I see again the limbs I loved, naked. The afternoon sun. This room, how well I know it. Now they are renting it and the one next to it as offices. The whole house has become an office building for agents, merchants, companies. This room, how familiar it is. Here near the door was the couch, a Turkish carpet in front of it, close by the shelf with two yellow vases. On the right, no, opposite, a wardrobe with a mirror in the middle of the table where he wrote. And the three big wicker chairs. Beside the window was the bed where we made love so many times. They must still be around somewhere, those old things. Beside the window was the bed. The afternoon sun fell across half of it. One afternoon at 4 o'clock, we separated for a week only, and then that week became forever. Comes to rest. It must have been 1 o'clock at night, or 1:30. A corner in the wine shop, behind the wooden partition, except for the two of us, the place completely empty. An oil lamp barely gave it light. The waiter on duty all day was sleeping by the door. No one could see us, but anyway, we were already so aroused. We became incapable of caution. Our clothes half open, we weren't wearing much. A divine July was ablaze. Delight of flesh between those half-open clothes. Quick bearing of flesh, the vision of it that has crossed 26 years and come to rest now in this poetry. Of the Jews, AD 50. Painter and poet, runner and discus thrower, beautiful as Idumean, Ianthus, son of Anthony, from a family on friendly terms with a synagogue. My most valuable days are those when I give up the pursuit of sensual beauty, when I desert the elegant and severe cult of Hellenism. With its overriding devotion to perfectly shaped, corruptible white limbs, and become the man I would want to remain forever. Son of the Jews, the holy Jews. A most fervent declaration on his part to remain forever a son of the Jews, the holy Jews. But he did not remain anything of that kind. The hedonism and art of Alexandria kept him as their dedicated son. Amenius. What should be cherished even more in the sensual pleasure that is achieved morbidly, corruptingly, its rarer finds the body able to feel what it requires. An erotic intensity that a healthy disposition cannot generate. Extract from a letter written by young Amenius from a patrician family notorious in Syracuse for his debauchery and the debauched times of Michael III. On board ship. It's like him, of course, this little pencil portrait, hurriedly sketched on the ship's deck, the afternoon magic that Ionian sea around us. It's like him, but I remember him as better looking. He was sensitive almost to the point of illness, and this highlighted his expression. He appears to me better looking, now that my soul brings him back out of time. Out of time, all these things are very long ago, the sketch, the ship, the afternoon. Of Demetrius Sote, 162 to 150. Everything he had hoped for turned out wrong. He had seen himself doing great things. ending the humiliation that kept his country down ever since the Battle of Magnesia. Seeing himself making Syria a powerful state again with her armies, her fleets, her great fortresses, her wealth. He had suffered in Rome, become bitter when he sensed in the talk of friends young men of the great families, that in spite of their delicacy, their politeness towards him, the son of King Seleucus Philoptor, when he sensed that in spite of this, there was always a secret contempt for the Hellenizing dynasties. Their heyday was over. They weren't fit for anything serious, were completely unable to rule their peoples. He had cut himself off, had become indignant, and had sworn it would not be at all the way they thought. Why wasn't he himself full of determination? He would act, he would fight, he would set things right again. If he could only find a way of getting to the east, only manage to escape from Italy, then all of his strength he feels inside him, all this energy he would pass on to his people. Only to find himself in Syria, he was so young when he left his country. He hardly remembered what it looked like, but in his mind he had always thought of it as something sacred that you approach reverently, as a beautiful place unveiled of vision, of Greek cities and Greek ports, and now despair and sorrow they were right, the young men in Rome. The dynasties born from the Macedonian conquest cannot be kept any longer. It doesn't matter, he made the effort, fought as much as he could. And in his bleak disillusion, there's only one thing that still fills him with pride. How, even in failure, he shows the world his same indomitable courage. The rest, they were dreams and wasted energy. This Syria is almost seems it isn't his homeland. This Syria is the country of Valus and Heraclius. If actual dead. Where did the sages withdraw to? Where did he disappear? After his many miracles, the renown of his teaching was spread to so many countries. He suddenly hid himself, and nobody knew for certain what happened to him. Nor did anybody ever see his grave. Some report that he died at Ephesus, but Damas does not record that in his memoir. Damas said nothing about the death of Polyaenus. Others said that he disappeared in Lindos, or maybe the story is true about his assumption in Crete, at the ancient sanctuary of Dicymia. But then again, we have that miraculous, that supernatural apparition of his, before a young student Tyana. But maybe the time had not yet come for us to return and show himself to the world again. Or maybe transfigured he moves among us unrecognized. But he will come again, as he was, teaching the ways of the truth, and then of course he will bring back the worship of our gods, and our elegant Hellenistic rites. These are the musings of one of the few pagans, one of the very few still left, as he sat in his shabby room just after reading Philostratus on Apollonius of Tyana. But even he, a trivial coward man, played the Christian in public and went to church. It was the time when Justin, known as the Elder, reigned in total piety, and Alexandria, a godly city, detested pitiful idolaters. Young men of Sidon, AD 400. The actor they had brought in to entertain them also recited a few choice epigrams. The room opened out on the garden, and a delicate odor of flowers mingled with the scent of the 5 perfumed young Sidonians. There were readings from Meleager, Pringers, Rhiannos, but when the actors recited, "Here lies Aeschylus, the son of Euphron the Athenian," stressing maybe more than he should have, his renowned valor in the sacred Marathonian grove. A vivacious young man, mad about literature, suddenly jumped up and said, "I don't like that quatrain at all. Sentiments of that kind seem somehow weak. Give, I say, all your strength to your work. Make it your total concern and don't forget your work. Even in times of trial or when you near your end, this is what I expect, what I demand of you, and not that you completely dismiss from your mind the magnificent art of your tragedies, your Agamemnon, your marvelous Prometheus, your representations of Orestes and Cassandra, your 7 against Thebes, to set down for your memorial merely that as an ordinary soldier, one of the herd, you too fought against Datis and Aphramus, to call up the shades. One candle is enough, its gentle light will be more suitable, will be more gracious when the shades arrive, the shades of love. One candle is enough to ignite the room, should not have too much light and deep reverie, all receptiveness, and with a gentle light in the steep reverie I will form visions to call up shades, the shades of love. Darius. Fenris, the poet, is at work. On the crucial part of his epic, how Darius, son of Hystapus, took over the Persian kingdom. It's from him, Darius, that our glorious King Mithridates, Dionysus, and Evaptor descends. But this calls from serious thought. Fenris has to analyze the feeling Darius must have had, arrogance maybe, and intoxication. No more than likely, a certain insight into the vanities of greatness. The poet thinks deeply about the question. But a servant rushes in, cuts him short to announce the very serious news. The war with the Romans had begun. Most of our army has crossed the borders. The poet is dumbfounded. What disaster! How can our glorious king Mithridates, Dionysus, and Evaptor bother about Greek poems now, in the middle of a war? Just think, Greek poems. Fenris gets all worked up. What bad luck, just when he was sure to distinguish himself, with Darius sure to silence his envious critics once and for all. What a setback, terrible setback to his plans. And if it's only a setback, that wouldn't be too bad, but can we really consider ourselves safe in Amosius? The town isn't very well fortified, and the Romans are the most awful enemies. Are we Cappadocians really a match for them? Is it conceivable? Are we now to pit ourselves against the legions? Great gods, protectors of Asia, help us. But through all his distress, all the turmoil, the poetic idea comes and goes insistently. Arrogance and intoxication. That the most likely, of course, arrogance and intoxication are what Darius must have felt. Anna Komnene. In the prologue to her Alexiad, Anna Komnene laments her widowhood. Her soul is all vertigo, and I bathe my eyes, she tells us, in rivers of tears. Alas for the waves of her life, alas for the revolutions. Sorrow burns her to the bone and the marrow and the splitting of her soul. But Truth seems to be this power-hungry woman knew only one sorrow that really mattered. Even if she doesn't admit it, this arrogant Greek woman had only one consuming pain. That with all her dexterity, she never managed to gain the throne, virtually snatched out of her hands by impudent John. A Byzantine nobleman in exile. Composing verses, the frivolous can call me frivolous. I've always been most punctilious about important things, and I insist that no one knows better than I do the Holy Fathers or the Scriptures or the canons of the church councils. Whenever he was in doubt, whenever he had any ecclesiastical problems, Botanus consulted me first of all. But exile here, may she be cursed that viper, Irene Ducania, incredibly bored, it is not altogether unfitting to amuse myself, writing 6 and 8 lines verses to amuse myself, poetizing myths of Hermes and Apollo and Dionysus, or the heroes of Thessaly and the Peloponnese, and to compose the most strict iambics, such as, if you allow me to say so, the intellectuals of Constantinople didn't know how to compose. It may be the strictness that provokes their disapproval. Their beginning. Their illicit pleasure has been fulfilled. They get up and dress quickly without a word. They come out of their house separately, furtively, and as they move along the street, a bit unsettled, it seems they sense that something about them betrays what kind of bed they've just been lying on. But what profit for the life of the artist? Tomorrow, the day after, or years later, who'll give voice to the strong lines that had their beginning here. The Favor of Alexander Valas. I'm not in the least proud that my chariot wheel broke, and I lost that silly race. I'll drink grape wines the whole night long, lying among lovely roses. Antioch is all mine. I'm the most celebrated young man in town. Valis' weakness, he simply adores me. You'll see tomorrow they'll say the race wasn't fair, though if I'd been crude enough to insist on it secretly, the flatterers would have given first place even to my limping chariot. Melancholy of Jason Cleander, poet in Kamanagi, 8595. The aging of my body and my beauty is a wound from a merciless knife. I'm not resigned to it at all. I turn to you, art of poetry, because you have a kind of knowledge about drugs, attempt to numb the pain, imagination, and language. It is a wound from a merciless knife. Bring your drugs, art of poetry. They numb the wound at least for a little while. Diametrus. His subject, the character of Diametrus, which Porphyry proposed to him in conversation, was outlined by the young sophist as follows. He planned to develop it rhetorically later. First, a courtier of King Darius, and after that of King Xerxes. Now, with Xerxes and his army, at last Diametrus will be vindicated. He was treated very unjustly. He was Ariston's son, but his enemies bribed the oracle brazenly. And it wasn't enough that they deprived him of his kingship, but when he finally gave in and decided to live quietly as a private citizen, they had to insult him even in front of the people. They had to humiliate him publicly at the festival. As a consequence, he served Xerxes assiduously. Along with a great Persian army, he will make it back to Sparta too, and king once again, how quickly he will throw him out, how thoroughly he will shame the schemer Leoticus. So now he spends his days full of anxiety advising the Persians, explaining what they should do to conquer Greece. Much worrying, much thinking, and for this reason, Diometrius finds his days so burdensome. Much worrying, much thinking, and for this reason, Diometrius cannot find a moment's joy, because what he's feeling can't be called joy. It's not, he will admit it. How can he call joy? His distress could not be greater. Now things make it quite clear to him that it is the Greeks who are going to win. I've brought to art. I say in a mood of reverie, I brought to art desires and sensations. Things half glimpsed, faces or lines, certain indistinct memories of unfulfilled love affairs. Let me submit to art. Art knows how to shape forms of beauty, almost imperceptibly completing life, blending impressions, blending day with day. From the school of the renowned philosopher. For 2 years he studied with Omnius Saccas. He was bored by both philosophy and Saccas. Then he went into politics, but he gave that up. That prefect was an idiot, and those around him, somber-faced, officious nitwits, they're Greek, poor fools, absolutely barbaric. After that, he became vaguely curious about the church to be baptized and pass as a Christian, but he soon changed his mind. It would certainly have caused a row with his parents, ostentatious pagans, and horrible thought they would cut off at once their extremely generous allowance. But he had to do something. He began to haunt the corrupt houses of Alexandria, every secret den of debauchery. In this, fortune favored him. He's been given an extremely handsome figure, and he enjoyed the divine gift. His looks would last at least another 10 years, and after that, maybe he'll go back to Saccas, or if the old man has died meanwhile, he'll go to another philosopher or sophist. There's always someone suitable around. Or in the end, he might possibly return even to politics, commendably remembering the traditions of his family, duty towards the country, and other resonant banalities of that kind. Craftsman of wine bowls. On this wine bowl, pure silver, made for the houses of Heraclides, where good taste is the rule. Notice these graceful flowers, the streams, the thyme. In the center, I put this beautiful young man, naked erotic, one leg still dangling in the water. Oh, memory, I begged for you to help me most in making the young face. I loved it appear the way it was. This proved very difficult because some 15 years have gone since that day. He died as a soldier in the defeat at Magnesia. Those who fought for the Achaean League. Brave men were you who fought and died so nobly, never afraid of those who were winning every battle. You were not to blame if Dionysus and Criticus were at fault. When Greeks were in a mood to boast, they'll say it is men like those our nation breeds. That's how great their praise will be. Ran by an Achaean in Alexandria during the 7th year of Ptolemy Lathyrus' reign. To Antiochus Epiphanes. The young Antiochian said to the king, My heart pulses with precious hope. The Macedonians, Antiochus Epiphanes, the Macedonians are back in the great fight. Let them only win, and I will give anyone who wants them the lion and the horses, the coral pan, the elegant palace, the gardens of Tyre, and everything else you give me, Antiochus Epiphanes. The king may have been moved a little, but then he remembered his father, his brother, and said nothing. An eavesdropper might repeat something they said. In any case, as expected, the terrible catastrophe came swiftly at Pydna. In an old book, forgotten between the leaves of an old book, almost 100 years ago, I found an unsigned watercolor. It must have been the work of a powerful artist, its title representation of love. Love of extreme sensualists would have been more to the point, because it became clear as you looked at the work, it was easy to see what the artist had in mind, that the young man in the painting was not designated for those who love in ways that are more or less healthy, inside the bounds of what is clearly permissible, with his deep chestnut eyes, the rare beauty of his face, the beauty of animalist charm, with those ideal lips that bring sensual delight to the body loved. Those ideal limbs shaped for beds that common morality calls shameless. And despair. He lost him completely, and now he tries to find his lips in the lips of each new lover. He tries in the union with each new lover to convince himself that it's the same young man that's it to him he gives himself. He lost him completely as though he never existed. He wanted, his lover said, to save himself from the tainted, unhealthy form of sexual pleasure, the tainted, shameful form of sexual pleasure. There was still time, he said, to save himself. He lost him completely as though he never existed, through fantasy, through hallucination. He's tried to find his lips in the lips of other young men. He longs to feel his kind of love once more. Julian saying contempt. Observing then that there is great contempt for the gods among us, he says in his solemn way, contempt. But what did he expect? Let him organize religion as much as he liked, write the high priest of Galatia, as much as he liked, or to others of his kind, inciting them, giving instruction. His friends weren't Christians, that much was certain, but even so they couldn't play, as he could, brought up a Christian, with a new religious system. Ludicrous in both theory and application, they were after all Greeks. Nothing in excess, Augustus. Epitaph of Antiochus, king of Comingi. After the funeral of the learned Antiochus, king of Comingi, whose life has been restrained and gentle, his sister, deeply afflicted, wanted an epitaph for him. So, on the advice of Syrian courtiers, the Ephesians Sophus Callistrus, who often resided in the small state of Comingi, and was a welcome and frequent guest at the royal house, wrote an epitaph and sent it to the old lady. People of Comingi, let the glory of Antiochus, the benevolent king, be celebrated as it deserves. He was a provider ruler of the country. He was just, wise, and courageous. In addition, he was the best things. Hellenic mankind has no quality more precious, everything that belongs to the gods. Theatre of Sidon AD 400. Son of an honorable citizen, most important of all, a good-looking young man of the theatre, amiable in many ways, I sometimes write highly audacious verses in Greek, and these I circulate surreptitiously, of course. O gods, may those Puritans who prattle about morals never see these verses about sensual kind of sexual pleasure, the kind that leads towards a barren love. Julian and Nicomedia. Things impolitic and dangerous praise for Greek ideals, supernatural magic visit to pagan temples, enthusiasm for the ancient gods, frequent talks with Prometheus, speculation with Maximus, the astute philosopher, and look what happened. Gallus is extremely worried. Constantinus has become suspicious. Julian's advisers were not all prudent. The matter, says Mardonius, has gone too far. The talk it has aroused must be stopped at all costs. So Julian goes to the church at Nicomedia, a lector again, and there with deep reverence he reads out loud passages from the Holy Scriptures, and everyone marvels at his Christian piety. They were before time altered them. They were full of sadness at their parting. That wasn't what they themselves wanted. It was circumstances. They needed to earn a living forced one of them to go far away, New York or Canada. The love they felt wasn't, of course, what it once had been. The attraction between them gradually diminished. The attraction had diminished a great deal. But to be separated, that wasn't what they themselves wanted. It was circumstances or maybe fate. He appeared as an artist and parted them now. Before their feelings died out completely, before time altered them. The one was seeming to remain for the other always what he was, the exquisite young man of 24. He had come there to read. He had come there to read 2 or 3 books to lie open, books by historians, by poets. But he read for barely 10 minutes, then gave up, falling half asleep on the sofa. He's completely devoted to books, but he's 23 and very good looking. And this afternoon, Eros entered his ideal flesh, his lips, erotic warmth entered his completely lovely flesh, with no ridiculous shame about the form of pleasure took. And Alexandria 31 BC. From his village near the outskirts of town, still dust covered from the journey, and the peddler arrives, and incense, gum, the best olive oil, perfume for your hair. He hawks through the streets, but with all the hubbub, the music, the parades, who can hear him? The crowd shoves him, drags him along, knocks him around, and when he asks, now totally confused, what's going on here? Someone tosses him to the huge palace lie that Antony is winning in Greece. John Cantacuzos triumphs. He sees the fields that still belong to him, the wheat, the animals, the trees laden with fruit, and beyond them from his ancestral home, full of clothes, costly furniture, silverware. They'll take it all away from him, oh God, they'll take it all away from him now. Would Konzakunos show pity for him? If he went and fell on his feet, they say he's merciful, very merciful. Both those around him and the army. Or should he fall down and plead before Lady Irene? Fool that he was to get mixed up in Anna's party. If only Lord Andronicus had never married her. Has she ever done anything good, shown any humanity? Even the Franks don't respect her. Her plans were ridiculous, all her plotting farcical. While they were threatening everyone from Constantinople, Constantinos demolished them. Lord John demolished them. And to think he planned to join Lord John's party, and he would have done it and would have been happy now. A great nobleman still his position secure, if the bishop had dissuaded him at the last moment. With his imposing heretic presence, his information bogus from beginning to end, his promises and all his drivel. Timotheus and Antiochian, AD 400. Lines written by young Timotheus madly in love. The title denotes the favorite of Antiochus Epiphanes. A very handsome young man from Samosata, but the lines comes out ardent, full of feeling. It is because Enlidos belonging to that other much older time, the 137th year of the Greek kingdom, maybe a bit earlier, and is in the poem merely as a name, a suitable one nevertheless. The poem gives voice to the love Timotheus feels, a beautiful kind of love worthy of him. We, the initiated, his intimate friends, we, the initiated, know about whom these lines were written. The unsuspecting Antiochian reader simply emotes of colored glass. I am very moved by one detail. In the coronation of a lectionary of John Kenzicunos and Irene, daughter of Andronicus Oson, because they had only a few precious stones, our afflicted empire was extremely poor. They wore artificial ones, numerous pieces of glass, red, green, and blue. I find nothing humiliating or undignified in those little pieces of colored glass. On the contrary, they seem a sad protest against the unjust misfortune of the couple being crowned, symbols of what they deserve to have, of what surely it was right that they should have at their coronation. A Lord John Kenzicunos, a Lady Irene, daughter of Droskin, a song. The 25th year of his life. He goes regularly to the tavern where they had first met the previous month. He made inquiries, but they weren't able to tell him anything. From what they said, he gathered that the person he met there was completely unknown. One of the many unknowns and shady young types who dropped in there. But he still goes to the tavern regularly at night, and sits there gazing towards the doorway until he's worn out. Maybe he'll walk in tonight. Maybe he'll turn up. He does this for nearly 3 weeks. His mind is sick with longing. The kisses are there on his mouth. His flesh, all of it, suffer unremittingly from desire. The feel of that other body is on his. He wants to be joined with him again. Of course he tries not to give himself away, but sometimes he almost doesn't care. Besides, he knows what he's exposing himself to, he come to accept it. Quite possibly, this life of his will land him in a devastating scandal. On an Italian shore, Chimo, son of Menelaus, a young Greek Italian, devotes his life to amusing himself, like most young men in Greater Greece, brought up in the lap of luxury. But today, in spite of his nature, he is preoccupied, dejected. Near the shore he watches, deeply distressed, as they unload ships with booty taken from the Peloponnese, Greek loot booty from Corinth. Today, it certainly is not right. It's not possible for the young Greek Italian to want to amuse himself in any way. In the boring village. In the boring village where he works, clerk in a textile shop, very young, and where he's weighing out the 2 or 3 months ahead, or 2, 3 months until business falls off, so he can leave for the city and plunge headlong into action. It's entertainment in the boring village, where he's weighing out the time. He goes to bed tonight full of sexual longing, all his youth on fire with the body's passion, his lovely youth given over to a fine intensity, and his sleep pleasure comes to him. In his sleep he sees and has the figure, the flesh he longed for. Apollonius of Tyana and Rhodes. Apollonius was speaking about proper education and upbringing, with a young man building a luxury house in Rhodes. When I enter a temple with the Tyanian, in conclusion, even if it is a small one, I would much rather see a gold and ivory statue there than find a large temple of statue of common clay. Of common clay, how disgusting, yet who haven't been adequately trained are taken in by what's bogus, those of common clay. Cleotis illness. Cleotis, a likable young man, about 23 years old, with upbringing of rare knowledge of Greek, is seriously ill. He caught the fever that reaped a harvest this year in Alexandria. The fever found him already worn out morally by the pain of knowing that his friend, a young actor, has stopped loving and wanting him. He is seriously ill and his parents are terribly worried. An old servant who has brought him up is also full of fear of Cleotis' life. And in her terrible anxiety, she remembered an idol used to worship when she was young before she came there as a maid to the house of distinguished Christians and turned Christian herself. She secretly brings some votive cake, some wine and honey, and places them before the idol. She chants whatever phrases she remembers from old prayers, odds and ends. The ninny doesn't realize that the black demon couldn't care less whether Christians get well or not. In a township of Asia Minor, the news about the outcome of the sea battle at Actium was of course unexpected, but there's no need for us to draft a new proclamation. The name's the only things that has to be changed. There in the concluding lines, instead of having freed the Romans from Octavius, that disaster, that parody of a Caesar, we substitute having freed the Romans from Antony, that disaster. The whole text fits very nicely. To the most glorious victor, matchless in his military ventures, prodigious in his political operations, on behalf of the township suddenly wished for Antony's triumphs. Here, as we said, the substitution for Octavius Caesar triumphs, regarding as Zeus' finest gift to the mighty protector of the Greeks, who graciously honors Greek customs, who is beloved to every Greek domain, who clearly deserves exalted praise, and those whose exploits should be recorded at length in the Greek language in both verse and prose, in the Greek language, the vehicle of fame, etc., etc. It all fills brilliantly. Priest at the Serpent. My kind old father, whose love for me has always stayed the same, I mourn my kind old father who died 2 days ago, just before dawn. Christ Jesus, I try each day in my every thought, word, and deed to keep the commandments of your holy church, and I adore all who deny you. But now I mourn, I grieve, O Christ, for my father, even though he was terrible, as is to say, priest at that cursed Serpent. In the taverness. I wallow in the tavernes and brothels of Beirut. I didn't want to stay in Alexandria. Timides left me. He went off with the prefect's son to earn himself a villa on the Nile, a mansion in the city. It wouldn't have been right for me to stay in Alexandria. I wallowed in the taverns and brothels of Beirut. I live a vile life devoted to cheap debauchery. The one thing that saves me, like durable beauty, like perfume, that goes on clinging to my flesh, and is this. Timides' most exquisite young man was mine for 2 years, and mine not for a house or a villa on the Nile. A great procession of priests and laymen. A procession of priests and laymen, each walk of life represented, moves through the streets, squares, and gates of the famous city Antioch. At the head of the imposing procession, a handsome white-clad boy carries the cross, his arms raised. Our strength and hope, the holy cross. The pagans, lately so full of arrogance, now reticent and cowardly, quickly slink away from the procession. Let them keep their distance, always keep their distance from us, as long as they do not renounce their errors. The Holy Cross goes forward. It brings joy and consolation to every quarter where Christians live. And these God-fearing people, elated, stand in their doorway and greet reverently the strength, the salvation of the universe, the cross. This is an annual Christian festival, but today, you see, is more conspicuous. The empire is delivered at last. The file of the appalling Julian reigns no longer. For the most pious Jovian, let us give our prayers. Sophists leaving Syria. Eminent sophists, now that you are leaving Syria with plans to write a book about Antioch, it is worth you mentioning Mevis in your work. The famous Mevis, unquestionably the best-looking, the most adored young man in all Antioch. No one of the others live his kind of life. No one of them gets paid what he gets paid. To have Mevis just for 2 or 3 days, they often give as much as 100 staters. I said in Antioch, but in most Alexandria as well. In fact, in Rome even, you can't find a young man as attractive as Mevis. Julian and the Antiochians. Was it conceivable that they would ever give up their beautiful way of life? The range of daily pleasure, that brilliant theater which consummated a union between art and the erotic prerogatives of the flesh. Immoral to a degree, and probably more than a degree they certainly were, but they had the satisfaction that their life was the notorious life of Antioch. Delectable, sensual, and absolute good taste. To give up all this, indeed, for what? His hot air about the false gods, his boring self-advertisement, his childish fear of the theater, his graceless prudery, his ridiculous beard. Oh, certainly they preferred C, certainly they preferred K 100 times over. Anna Dalcini. In the royal decree that Alexios Komnenos put especially to honor his mother, the very intelligent lady Anna Dalcini, noteworthy in her work and her manner, much is said to praise of her. Here let me offer one phrase only, a phrase that is beautiful, sublime. She never uttered those cold words, mine or yours. Days of 1896. He became completely degraded, his erotic tendency condemned and strictly forbidden. But innate for all that. Was the cause of its society was totally prudish? He gradually lost what little money he had, then his social standing, then his reputation. Nearly 30, he had never worked a full year, at least not at a legitimate job. Sometimes he earned enough to get by acting the go-between deals concerning shameful, he ended up the type likely to compromise you thoroughly if you were seen around with him often. But this isn't the whole story. That would not be fair. The memory of his beauty deserves bear. There is another angle seen from that. He appears attractive, appears a simple, genuine child of love, without hesitant putting above his honor and reputation the pure sensuality of his pure flesh, above his reputation, but society's prudish and stupid had it wrong. Two young men, 23 to 24 years old. He'd been sitting in the cafe since 10:30, expecting him to turn up any minute. Midnight went by and he was still waiting for him. It was now after 1:30 and the cafe was almost deserted. He's grown tired of reading newspapers mechanically. Of his 3 lonely shillings, only one was left. Waiting that long, he spent the others on coffee and brandy. He smoked all his cigarettes, so much weight had worn him out. Because alone like that for so many hours, he also began to have disturbing thoughts about the immoral life he was living. But when he saw his friend come in, weariness, boredom, thoughts vanished at once. His friend brought unexpected news. He's won £60 playing cards. Their good looks, their exquisite youthfulness, the sensitive love they share, were refreshed, livened, invigorated by the £60 from the card table. Now all the joy and vitality, feeling and charm, they went not to the homes of their respectable families, where they were no longer wanted anyway. They went to a familiar and very special house of debauchery, and they asked for a bedroom and expensive drinks, and they drank again. And when the expensive drinks were finished and it was close to 4 in the morning, happy, they gave themselves to love. Greek from ancient times. Antioch is proud of its splendid buildings, its beautiful streets, the lovely countryside around it, its teeming populations proud too of its glorious kings, its artists and sages, its very rich yet prudent merchants. But far more than all this, Antioch is very proud to be a city, Greek from ancient times, related to Argos through Ion, founded by Argive colonists in honor of Inachus' daughter. Days of 1901. The exceptional thing about him was, in spite of all his loose living, his vast sexual experience, and the fact that unusually his attitude matched his age, in spite of this, there were moments, extremely rare of course, when he gave the impression that his flesh was almost virginal. His 29 years old beauty, so tested by sensual pleasure, would sometimes strangely remind one of a boy who somewhat awkwardly gives his pure body to love for the first time. You didn't understand. Vecchios Julian had the following to say about religious belief. I read, I understood, I condemned. He thought we'd be annihilated by that condemned, the silly ass. Witticisms like that don't cut any ice with us Christians, our quick reply. You read, but you didn't understand. Had you understood, you wouldn't have condemned. A young poet in his 24th year. Brain work now as well as you can. A one-sided passion destroying him. He's in a maddening situation. Every day he kisses the face he worships. His hands are on those exquisite limbs he never loved before with this degree of passion. But the beautiful fulfillment of love is lacking. That fulfillment is lacking, which both of them must want the same intensity. They aren't equally given to the abnormal form of sensual pleasure, only he is completely possessed by it. And so he's wearing himself out on all edge. Then, to make things work, he's out of work. He manages somehow to borrow a little here and there, sometimes almost begging for it, and he just gets by. He kisses those adored lips, excites himself on that exquisite bite, then he now feels it only acquiesces. And then he drinks and smokes, and he drags himself to all the cafes all day long, drags the weariness consuming his beauty, brings work now as well as you can. In Sparta. He didn't know King Cleomenes, he didn't dare. He just did not know how to tell his mother a thing like this. That Ptolemy demanded to guarantee their treaty that she too go to Egypt and be there as a hostage. A very humiliating and decorous thing. And he would be about to speak, yet always hesitant, would start to tell her, yet always stops. But the magnificent woman understood him. She had already heard some rumor about it, and she encouraged him to come out with it clearly. And she laughed, saying, of course she would go. Indeed, was happy that in her old age she could still be useful to Sparta still. As for the humiliation, that didn't touch her at all. Of course, an upstart like the Legate couldn't possibly comprehend the Spartan spirit, so his demand could not in fact humiliate a royal lady like herself, mother of a Spartan king. Picture of a 23-year-old painted by his friend of the same age, an amateur. He finished the picture yesterday noon. Now he looks at it detail by detail. He painted him wearing an unbuttoned gray jacket, no vest, tieless, with a rose-colored shirt, open allowing a glimpse of his beautiful chest and neck. The right side of his forehead is almost covered by his hair, his lovely hair, done in a style he recently adopted. He's managed to capture perfectly the sensual note he wanted when he did the eyes, when he did the lips, that mouth of his, those lips, so ready to satisfy a special kind of erotic pleasure. In a large Greek colony 200 BC. The things in the colony are not what they should be. No one could doubt any longer, and though in spite of everything we do go forward, maybe as more than a few believe, the time has come to bring a political reformer. And here's the problem, here's the hitch. They make a tremendous fuss about everything, these reformers. What a relief it would be if no one ever needed them. They probe everything, question the smallest detail, and right away think up of radical changes that demand immediate execution. Also, they have a liking for sacrifice. Get rid of that property, your owning it is risky. Properties like these are exactly what run colonies. Get rid of that income and the other connected with it. And this third as a natural consequence. They are substantial, but what can one do? The responsibility they create for you is damaging. And as they proceed with their investigation, they find an endless number of useless things to eliminate. Things that are, however, difficult to get rid of. When all being well, they finish the job, every detail they diagnosed and sliced away, and they retire, also taking the wages due to them. It will be a miracle if anything is left at all after such surgical efficiency. Maybe the moment has not yet arrived. Let it not be too hasty. Haste is a dangerous thing. Untimely measures bring repentance. Certainly and happily, many things in the colony are absurd. But is there anything human without some fault, and after all, you see, we do go forward. A prince from western Libya, Aristinus, son of Melanus, the prince from western Libya, was generally liked in Alexandria. During the 10 days he spent there, as his name, his dress modest, was also Greek. He received honors gladly, but he did not solicit them. He was unassuming. He brought Greek books, especially history and philosophy. Above all, he was a man of few words. It got around that he must be a profound thinker, and men like that don't speak very much. He was neither a profound thinker nor anything else, just a piddling, laughable man. He assumed a Greek name, dressed like the Greeks, learned to behave more or less like a Greek, and all the time he was terrified he would spoil his reasonably good image by coming out with the barbaric colors in Greek and the Alexandrians in their usual way, and would make fun of him. Vile people that they are. This was why he limited himself to a few words, terribly careful of his syntax and pronunciation, and he was driven almost out of his mind having so much talk bottled up inside him. Cimon, son of Lycurgus, 22, student of Greek literature in Cyrene. My end came while I was happy. Ermotulus had me for his inseparable friend. During my last days, though he tried to make me believe that he wasn't worried, I often noticed his eyes red from crying. And when he think I'd fallen asleep, he collapsed at the edge of my bed as though out of his mind. But we were both young, of the same age, 23 years old. Fate is a traitor. Maybe some other passion would have taken Amaryllis from me. I died well in love, and that was undivided. The epitaph for Amaryllis, son of Astromedus, who died in Alexandria a month ago, was sent to me, his cousin Cimon, in my mourning. It was sent by the author, a poet friend of mine. Sent because he knew I was related to Marlis, that's all he knew. My heart is full of sorrow over Marlis. We grew up together like brothers. I'm deeply saddened. His premature death completely wiped out any grudge. Any grudge I may have had against Marlis, even if he did steal Emeritus' love away from me, so that if Emeritus should want me again now, it won't be at all the same as it was. I know this susceptible nature of mine, the image of Marillus, will come between us, and I will imagine it saying, "See, you are satisfied now. You've taken him back as you long to, Cimon. See, you no longer have excuse for maligning me now." On the march to Sinope, Mithridates, glorious and powerful, ruler of great cities, master of strong armies and fleets, on the march to Sinope took a route through a remote part of the country where a soothsayer lived. Mithridates sent one of his officers to ask the soothsayer how much more wealth, how much more power he accumulated in the future. He dispatched one of his officers, then continued to march to Sinope. The soothsayer withdrew into a secret room. About a half an hour later, he came out troubled and said to the officer, "I wasn't able to clarify things very well. Today is not a propitious day. There were some murky shadows. I didn't understand them fully. I think the king should be content with what he has. Anything more will prove dangerous for him. Remember, officer, to tell him that, for the God's sake, to be satisfied with what he has. Fortune changes suddenly. Tell King Mithridates this. It is extremely rare to come across anyone like his ancestor's companion. The noble companion who wrote to the earth with his lance. Those timely words that saved him escaped Mithridates. Days of 1909, 10, and 11. He was the son of a harassed, poverty-stricken sailor from an island in the Aegean Sea. He worked for a blacksmith, his clothes shabby, his work shoes miserably torn, his hands filthy with rust and oil. In the evenings after the shop closed, if there was something he longed for, especially a fairly expensive tie, a tie for Sunday, or if he saw and coveted a beautiful blue shirt in some store window, he'd sell his body for $1 or two. I asked myself if the glorious Alexandria of ancient times could boast of a boy more exquisite, more perfect, lost though he was, that is. We don't have a statue or painting of him, thrust into that awful blacksmith shop. Overworked, tormented, given to cheap debauchery, he was soon used up. Myrus, Alexandria, AD 340. When I heard the terrible news that Myrus was dead, I went to his house, though I avoid going to the houses of Christians, especially during times of mourning or festivity. I stood in the corridor. I didn't want to go further inside because I noticed that the relatives of the deceased looked at me with obvious surprise and displeasure. They had him in a large room, and from the corner where I stood I could catch a glimpse of it. All precious carpets, vessels in silver and gold. I stood and wept in the corner of the corridor, and I thought how our parties and excursions would no longer be worthwhile without Iris. And I thought how I'd no longer see him out our wonderfully indecent night-long sessions, enjoying himself, laughing and reciting verses, with his perfect feel for Greek rhythm, and I thought how I lost forever his beauty, lost forever the young man I worshipped so passionately. Some old women close to me were talking with lowered voices about the last day he lived, the name of Christ constantly on his lips, his hands holding a cross. Then four Christian priests came into the room and said prayers fervently and arising to Jesus or to Mary. I'm not familiar with their religion. We know, of course, that Maris was a Christian, known from the very start when he first joined our group, a year before last. But he lived exactly as we did, more devoted to pleasure than all of us. He scattered his money lavishly on amusement, not caring what anyone thought of him. He threw himself eagerly into nighttime scuffles. When our group happened to clash with some rival group in the streets, he never spoke about his religion, and once he even told me that we'd take him with us to the Serapeum. I remember now, he didn't seem to like this joke of ours, and yes, now I recall two other instances. When we made libations to Poseidon, he drew himself back from our circle and looked elsewhere. And one of us, in his fervor, said, "May all of us be favored and protected by the great sublime Apollo." Iris, unheard by others, whispered, not counting me. The Christian priests were praying loudly for the young man's soul. I noticed with how much diligence, how much intense concern for the forms of their religion they were preparing. Everything for the Christian funeral, and suddenly all sensation took hold of me. Indefinitely, I felt as if Iris were going from me. I felt that he, a Christian, was united with his own people, and that I was becoming a stranger, a total stranger. I even felt a doubt come over me that I also be deceived by my passion and had always been a stranger to him. I rushed out of that horrible house, rushed away before my memory of Irish could be captured, could be perverted by their Christianity. Uh, Alexander, Janos, and Alexandra. Full of their success, thoroughly satisfied, King Alexander Janos and his wife, Queen Alexandria, moved through the streets of Jerusalem with musicians in the lead and every kind of pomp and circumstance. The work begun by the great Judas Maccabeus and his four celebrated brothers has now been concluded brilliantly. Work relentlessly carried on among so many other obstacles and dangers. Nothing unseemly remains now. All subservience to the haughty monarchs of Antioch is over. Clearly, King Alexander Janos and his wife Queen Alexandria are equal to the Seleucids in every way. Good Jews, pure Jews, devoted Jews above all that circumstances required. Also skilled in speaking Greek, even on familiar terms with Greeks and Hellenized monarchs. As equals, though, let that be understood, the work begun by the great Judas Maccabeus and his four celebrated brothers had indeed been concluded brilliantly, concluded in the most striking way. Lovely white flowers. He went inside from the cafe where they used to go together. It was here 3 months ago that his friend told him, "We are completely broke, the two of us so poor that we're down to staying in the cheapest places. I have to tell you straight out, I can't go around you anymore. I want you to know somebody else is after me." The somebody else had promised me 2 suits, some silk handkerchiefs, to get his friend back. He himself went through hell rounding up 20 pounds. His friend came back to him for the 20 pounds, but along with that, for their old intimacy, their old love, for the deep feeling between them, the somebody else was a liar, a real bum. He ordered only 1 suit for his friend, and that under pressure after much begging. But now he doesn't want the suit any longer. He doesn't want the silk handkerchiefs out after all, or the 20 pounds or 20 piastres even. Sunday they buried him at 10 in the morning. Sunday they buried him almost a week ago. He laid white flowers on his cheap coffin, lovely white flowers very much in keeping with his beauty, his 22 years. When he went to the cafe that evening, he happened to have some vital business there, the same cafe where they used to go together. It was a knife in his heart, that dingy cafe where they used to go together. Come, O King of the Lacedaemonians. Protesiclea didn't deign to allow the people to see her weeping and grieving. She walked in dignity and silence. Her face calm betrayed nothing of her sorrow and her agony. But even so, for a moment she couldn't hold back. Before she went aboard the detestable ship for Alexandria, she took her son to Poseidon's temple, and once they were alone, she embraced him tenderly and kissed him. He was in great distress, says Plutarch, badly shaken. But her strong character struggled through, regained her poise. The magnificent woman said to Cleomenes, "Come, O King of the Lacedaemonians. When we go outside, let no one see us weeping, or behaving in any way unworthy of Sparta. At least this is still in our power. What lies ahead is in the hands of the gods." And she boarded the ship, going towards whatever lay in the hands of the gods. In the same space, the setting of houses, cafes, and neighborhoods that I've seen and walked through years on end. I created you while I was happy, while I was sad. With so many incidents, so many details, and for me the whole of you is transformed into feeling. The mirror in the front hall. The luxurious house had a huge mirror in the front hall, a very old mirror brought at least 8 years ago. A very handsome boy, a tailor's assistant, on Sunday, an amateur athlete, stood there with a package. He gave it to one of the household, who took in to get the receipt. The tailor's assistant was left alone waiting there. He went to the mirror, looked at himself, and adjusted his tie. 5 minutes later, they brought him the receipt. He took it and went away. The old mirror that had seen so much during a life of many years, thousands of objects and faces, the old mirror was all joy now, proud to have embraced total beauty for a few moments. He asked about the quality. He left the office where he'd taken up a trivial, poorly paid job, £8 a month, including bonuses. Left at the end of the dreary work that kept him bent all afternoon, came out at 7 and walked off slowly, idling his way down the street, good looking and interesting, showing as he did that he reached his full sensual capacity. He turned 29 the month before. He idled his way down the main street and the poor side streets that led to his home. Passing in front of the small shop that sold cheap and flimsy things for workers, he saw a face inside, saw a figure that compelled him to go in. He pretended he wanted to look at some colored handkerchiefs. He asked about the quality of the handkerchiefs and how much they cost, his voice choking, almost silenced by desire, and the answer came back the same way. Distracted, the voice hushed, offering hidden consent. They kept on talking about the merchandise, about the only purpose that their hands might touch over the handkerchiefs, and their faces, their lips, might move closer together as though by chance. A moment's meeting of limb against limb. Quickly, secretly, so the shop owner sitting in the back wouldn't realize what was going on. To have taken the trouble. I'm broke and practically homeless. This fatal city Antioch has devoured all my money. This fatal city with its extravagant life, but I'm young and in excellent health. Prodigious master of the things Greek. I know Aristotle and Plato through and through. Poets, orators, or anyone else you could mention. I have some idea about military matters and friends among the senior mercenaries. I also have a foot in the administrative world. I spent 6 months in Alexandria last year. I know, and this is useful, something about what goes on there. The scheming Catargetus, his dirty deals, and the rest of it. So I consider myself completely qualified to serve this country, my beloved fatherland Syria. Whatever job they give me, I'll try to be useful to the country. That's my intention, but if they frustrate me with their maneuvers, we know them, those smart operators, no need to say more. If they frustrate me, it's not my fault. I'll approach Zebinus first, and if that idiot doesn't appreciate me, I'll go to his rival, Grypus. And if that imbecile doesn't take me on, I'll go straight to Hyrcanus. One of the three will want me anyway, and my conscience is quiet about my not caring which one I choose. The three of them are equally bad for Syria. But a ruined man, it's not my fault. I'm only trying, poor devil, to make ends meet. The almighty gods ought to have taken the trouble to create a fourth honest man. I would have gladly gone along with him. Following the recipe of ancient Greco-Syrian magicians, said aesthete, what dissolution from magic herbs can I find? What dissolution following the recipe of ancient Greco-Syrian magicians that will bring back one to me for one day if its power doesn't last longer, or even for a few hours, my 23rd year, bring back to me my friend of 22, his beauty, his love. What dissolution following the recipe of ancient Greco-Syrian magicians can be found to bring back also as part of this return things of the past, even the little room we shared. In the year 200 BC, Alexander, son of Philip, and the Greeks accept the Lacedaemonians. We can very well imagine how completely indifferent the Spartans would have been to this inscription, except the Lacedaemonians. Naturally, the Spartans weren't to be led and ordered around like precious servants. Besides a pan-Hellenic expedition without Spartan king in command was not to be taken very seriously. Of course, then accept the Lacedaemonians. That's certainly one point of view, quite understandable. So accept the Lacedaemonians at Granicus, then at Issus, then in the decisive battle where the terrible army the Persians mustered at Arbela was wiped out. It set out for victory from Arbela and was wiped out. And from this marvelous pan-Hellenic expedition, triumphant, brilliant in every way, celebrated on all sides, glorified as no other has ever been glorified. Incomparable, we emerged the great new Hellenic world. We, the Alexandrians, the Antiochians, the Seleucians, and the countless others of Greeks of Egypt and Syria, and those in Media, Persia, and all the rest. With our far-flung supremacy, our flexible policy of judicious integration, and our common Greek language, which we carried as far as Bactria, as far as the Indians. Talk about the Lacedaemonians after that. Days of 1908. He was out of work that year, so he lived off card games, backgammon, and borrowed money. He was offered a job at £3 a month in a small stationery store, but he turned it down without the slightest hesitation. It wasn't suitable, it wasn't the right pay for him, a reasonably educated young man of 25 years old. He won $2, maybe $3 a day, sometimes. How much could he expect to make out of cards and backgammon in the cafe of his social level? Working class places, however cleverly he played, however stupid the opponents he chose. His borrowing, that was even worse. He rarely picked a dollar, and usually no more than half that, and sometimes he had to come down to even less. For a week or so, sometimes longer, when he managed to escape those horrible nights, he cooled himself at the baths and with a morning swim. His clothes were a terrible mess. He always wore the same suit, a very faded salmon brown suit. Oh, summer days of 1908. From your perspective, the salmon suit was tastefully excluded. Your perspective has preserved him as he was when he threw off those unworthy clothes, that mended underwear, and stood stark naked, impeccably handsome, a miracle, his hair uncombed, swept back, his limbs a little tan from his morning nakedness at the baths and on the beach. Now, we're going to do the unpublished poems of 1896 to 1933. Julian at the Mysteries. But when he found himself in darkness in the earth's dreadful depths, accompanied by unholy Greeks and bodiless figures appeared before him. With halos and bright lights, the young Julian momentarily lost his nerve. Impulse from his pious years came back and he crossed himself. The figures vanished at once, the halos faded away, the lights went out, the Greeks exchanged glances. The young man said, "Did you see the miracle? Dear companions, I'm frightened. I'm frightened, friends, I want to leave. Didn't you see how the demon vanished the second they saw me make the holy sign of the cross?" The Greeks chuckled scornfully. "Shame on you! Shame to the talk that way to us sophists and philosophers. If you want to say that thing, say them to the Bishop of Nicomedia and his priests. The greatest gods of our glorious Greece appeared before you, and if they left, I don't think that for a minute they were frightened by a gesture. It was just that when they saw you making that vow, that crude sign, their noble nature was disgusted and they left you in contempt." This is what they said to him, and the fool recovered from his holy blessed fear, convinced by the unholy words of the Greeks. King Claudius. My mind now moves to the distant places. I'm walking the streets of Elsinore, through its square, and I recall the very sad story of the unfortunate king killed by his nephew because of some fanciful suspicions. In all the homes of the poor he was mourned secretly. They feared Fortinbras. He was quiet gentleman, a man who loved peace. His country had suffered much from the wars of his predecessors. He behaved graciously towards everyone, humble and great alike. Never high-handed, he always sought advice in the kingdom's affairs. From serious, experienced people, just why his nephew killed him was never precisely explained. The prince suspected him of murder, and the basis of his suspicions was his walking one night along with an ancient battlement. He thought he saw a ghost, and he had a conversation with the ghost, and when he supposedly heard from the ghost were certain accusations against the king. It must have been a bit of fancy, an optical illusion. The prince was highly stung in the extreme while he was studying at Wittenberg. Many of his fellow students thought him a maniac. A few days later, he went to his mother's rooms to discuss certain family affairs, and suddenly, while he was talking, he lost his self-control, started shouting, screaming, and the ghosts were there in front of him. But his mother saw nothing at all. And that same day, for no apparent reason, he killed an old gentleman at the court. Since the prince was due to sail for England in a day or two, the king hustled him off post haste in order to save him. But the people were so outraged by the monstrous murder that rebel rose up and tried to storm the palace gates, led by the dead man's son, the noble lord Laertes. A brave young man, also ambitious, in the confusion said of his friends called out, "Long live King Laertes." Later, once the king had calmed down and the king was lying in his grave, killed by his nephew, the prince who never went to England but escaped from the ship on his way there, a certain Horatio came forward and tried to exonerate the prince by telling some stories of his own. He said the voyage to England had been a secret plot and order had been given to kill the prince there, but this was never clearly ascertained. He also spoke of poisoned wine, wine poisoned by the king. It's true that Laertes spoke of this too, but couldn't he have been lying? Couldn't he have been mistaken, and when did he say all this? while dying of his wounds, his mind reeling, his talk seemingly babble. As for the poisoned weapons, it was shown later that the poisoning had been done by the king at all. Laertes had done it by himself, but Horatio, whenever pressed, would produce even the ghost as a witness, but the ghost said this and that. The ghost did this and that. Because of all this, though hearing Horatio out, most people in all consciousness paid the good king, who with all these ghosts and fairy tales was unjustly killed and disposed of. Yet Fortinbras, who profited from it all and gained the throne so easily, gave full attention and great weight to every word Horatio said. When the watchman saw the light, winter, summer, the watchman sat there looking out. From the roof of Atreus's palace, now he has good news to report. In the distance, he saw the fire light up, and he's happy. Besides, the drudgery's over now. It's hard to sit there night and day, in heat and cold, looking out for a fire to appear on the peak of the Arcanian. Now the longed for signal has appeared, yet when happiness comes, it brings less joy than one expect. But at least this much has been gained. We rid of ourselves of hope and expectation. Many things will happen to the house of Atreus. No need to be wise to guess this now that the watchman has seen the light. So let's not exaggerate. The light is good, and those coming are good. Their words and actions are good, and let's hope all goes well. But Argos can do without the house of Atreus. Ancient houses are not eternal. Of course, many people will have much to say. We should listen, but we won't be deceived by words such as indispensable, unique, and great. Someone also indispensable and unique and great can always be found at a moment's notice. Growing in spirit. He who hopes to grow in spirit will have to be transcend and obedience and respect. He will hold to some law he will mostly violate, both law and custom, and go beyond the established inadequate norm. Sensual pleasure will have much to teach him. He will not be afraid of the destructive act. Half the house will have to come down this way. He will grow virtuously into wisdom. September of 1903. At least let me deceive myself with illusions so as not to feel my empty life. And yet I come so close so many times, and yet how paralyzed I was, how cowardly, why did I keep my lips sealed? While my empty life wept inside me, my desires wore robes of mourning. To have been so close so many times to those sensual eyes, those lips, to the body I dreamed of, loved, to have been so close so many times. December of 1903. And if I cannot speak about my love, if I do not talk about your hair, your lips, your eyes, still your face that I keep within my heart, the sound of your voice that I keep within my mind, the days of September that rise in my dreams give shape and color to my words, my sentences, whatever theme I touch, whatever thought I utter. On the stairs. As I was going down those ill-famed stairs, you were coming in the door, and for a second I saw your unfamiliar face, and you saw mine. Then I hid so you wouldn't see me again, and you hurried past me, hiding your face, and slipped inside the ill-famed house, where you wouldn't have found sensual pleasure any more than I did. And yet the love you were looking for I had to give you, the love I was looking for. So your tired, knowing eyes implied, you had to give me. Our bodies sensed and sought each other, our blood and skin understood, but flustered we both hid ourselves. At the theater. I got bored looking at the stage and raised my eye to the box circle. In one of the boxes I saw you with your strange beauty, your dissolute youthfulness. My thoughts turned back at once to all they told me about you that afternoon. My mind and body were aroused, and I gazed enthralled at your languid beauty, your languid youthfulness. In my imagination, I kept picturing you the way they talked about you that afternoon. Poseidon, Poseidians. The Poseidians forgot the Greek language after so many centuries of mingling with Tyrians, Latins, and other foreigners. The only thing surviving from their ancestors was a Greek festival with beautiful rites, with lyres, flutes, contests, and wreaths. And it was their habit towards the festival end to tell each other about their ancient customs and once again to speak Greek names that only a few of them still recognized. And so their festivals always had melancholy ending because they remember they were who were Greek. They too once upon a time were citizens of Magna Graecia, and how low they have fallen now. But they become living and speaking like barbarians cut off so disastrously from the Greeks' way of life. Antony's ending. But when he heard the women weeping, lamenting his sorry state, Madame, with her oriental gestures, and her slaves with their barbarized Greek, the pride in his soul rose up. His Italian blood sickened with disgust. And all he had worshipped blindly till then, his passionate Alexandrian life, now seemed dull and alien, and he told them to stop weeping for him. That kind of thing was all wrong. They ought to be singing his praises for having been a great ruler. So rich in worldly goods, and if he'd fallen now, he had fallen humbly, but as a Roman, languished by a Roman. Hidden things. From all I did and all I said, let no one try to find out who I was. An obstacle was there that changed the pattern of my actions and the manner of my life. The obstacle was often there to stop me when I began to speak. From my most unnoticed actions, my most veiled writings, from those alone will I be understood. But maybe it isn't worth it so much concern, so much effort to discover who I really am. Later, in a more perfect society, someone else made just like me, is certain to appear and act freely. On hearing of love. On hearing about powerful love, respond he moved like a athlete, only fortune as you been. Remember how much your imagination created for you, this first and then the rest, the lesser loves that you experienced and enjoyed. In your life, the more real and tangible of loves like these you were not deprived. The rest I will tell those down in Hades. Indeed, said the proconsul, closing the book, this line is beautiful and very true. Sophocles wrote it in a very deeply philosophical mood. How much will tell down there, how much and how very different will appear. What we protect here, like sleepless guards, wounds and secrets locked inside us. Protect with such great anxiety day after day, will disclose freely and clearly down there. You might add, said the sophist, half smiling, if they talk about things like that down there, if they bother about them any more. The photograph. And his obscene photograph sold secretly in the streets so the policeman won't see. In this lewd photograph, how could there be such a dreamlike face? How did you get in there? Who knows what degrading, vulgar life you led? How horrible the surroundings must have been when you posed to have this picture taken. What cheap soul you must have, but in spite of all this, and even more, you remain for me the dreamlike face, the figure, shaped for and dedicated to the Greek kind of sensual pleasure. That's how you remain for me, and how my poetry speaks about you. Going back home from Greece. Well, we are nearly there, Hermippos. Day after tomorrow, it seems that's what the captain said. At least we are sailing our seas. The waters of Cyprus, Syria, and Egypt, the beloved waters of our home countries. Why so silent? Asked your heart. Didn't you feel too? Didn't you too feel happier the farther we got from Greece? What's the point of fooling ourselves? That would hardly be properly Greek. It's time we admit the truth. We are Greek also. What else are we but with Asiatic affections and feelings? Affection and feelings sometimes alien to Hellenism. It isn't right, Hermpos, for us philosophers to be like some of our petty kings. Remember how we laughed at them when they used to come to our lectures? Who through their showy Hellenified exteriors, Macedonian exteriors, naturally, let a bit of Arabia peep out now and then, a bit of Media they can't keep back, and to what laughable lengths the fools went trying to cover it up. Now that's not at all right for us. For Greeks like us, what kind of pettiness, that kind of pettiness won't do. We must not be ashamed of the Syrian Egyptian blood in our veins. We should really honor it, take pride in it. Exiles. It goes on being Alexandria still. Just walk a bit along the straight road that end at the Hippodrome, and you'll see palaces and monuments that will amaze you. Whatever war damage it has suffered, however much smaller it has become, it is still a wonderful city, and what with excursions and books and various kinds of study, time goes by. In the evening, we meet on the seafront, the five of us, all naturally under fictitious names, and some other Greeks of the few still left in the city. Sometimes we discuss church affairs. The people here seem to lean towards Rome, and sometimes literature. The other day we read some lines by Nonnos. What imaginary, what imagery, what dictation, what rhythm and harmony. All enthusiasm, how much we admired the Ponapeloton. So the days go by and our stay here, it is not unpleasant because, naturally, it is not going to last forever. We had good news. Either something is now afoot in Smyrna, or in April our friends are sure to move from Epirus. So, one way or another, our plans are definitely working out, and will easily overthrow Basil, and when we do, at least our turn will come. Theophilus Palaeologos. This is the last year. This is the last of the Greek emperors, and alas, how sadly those around him talk. Here Theophilus Palaeologos, in his grief, in his despair, says, I would rather die than live. Ah, Kyr Theophilus Palaeologos, how much of the pathos, the yearning of our race, how much weariness, such exhaustion from injustice and persecution, your 6 tragic words contain. And I longed and lay on their beds. When I went to the House of Pleasure, I didn't stay in the front rooms where they celebrate with some decorum and accepted modes of love. I went to the secret rooms and I longed and laid on their beds. I went into the secret rooms, considered shameful even to name, but not shameful to me because if they were, what kind of poet, what kind of artist would I be? I'd rather be ascetic. That would be in more keeping and much more keeping with my poetry than for me to find pleasure in the commonplace rooms. Half an hour. I never had you, nor I suppose will I ever have you. A few words on approach, as in the bar the other day. Nothing more, it's sad, I admit. But we who serve art, sometimes with a mind's intensity, can create, but of course only for a short time. Pleasure that seems almost physical, that's how in the bar the other day, mercifully helped by alcohol, I had half an hour that was totally erotic. And I think you understood this and stayed slightly longer on purpose. That was very necessary because with all the imagination, with all the magic alcohol, I needed to see your lips as well, needed your body near me. Simeon. Yes, I know his new poems, all Beirut is raving about them. I'll study them some other day. I can't today because I'm rather upset. Certainly he's more learned in Greek than Libyanus, a better poet than Melior, though I don't think so. But Nevis, why talk about Libyanus books and all these trivialities? Nevis, yesterday I found myself, it happened by chance, under Simeon's pillar. I slipped in among the Christians, praying and worshipping in silence there, revering him. Not being a Christian myself, I couldn't share their spiritual peace. I trembled all over and suffered. I shuddered, disturbed, terribly moved. Please don't smile. For 35 years, think of it. Winter and summer, night and day, for 35 years, he's been living and suffering on top of a pillar before either of us was born. I'm 29, you must be younger than I am. Before we were born, just imagine, Simeon climbed up his pillar and has stayed up there ever since, facing God. I'm in no mood for work today, but Mevis, I think it better that you report this. Whatever the other sophists say, I at least recognize Layman as Syria's leading poet. The bandaged shoulder. He said he hurt himself by falling against a wall or had fallen down. But there was probably some other reason. For the wounded, the bandaged shoulder, because of a rather abrupt gesture, as he reached for a shelf to bring down some photograph he wanted to look at, the bandage came undone and a little blood ran. I did it up again, taking my time over the binding. He wasn't in pain and I liked looking at the blood. It was a thing of my love, that blood. When he left, I found in front of his chair a bloody rag, part of the dressing, a rag to be thrown straight into the garbage. I put it to my lips and kept it there a long while, the blood of love against my lips. Alright, this is the last poem. On the outskirts of Antioch. We in Antioch were astonished when we heard what Julian was up to now. Apollo had made things clear to him at Daphne. He didn't want to give an oracle as though we cared. He didn't intend to speak prophetically unless his temple at Daphne was purified first. The nearby dead, he declared, got on his nerves. There are many tombs at Daphne. One of those buried there was the triumphant holy martyr Vivalis, wonder and glory of our church. It was him the false god hinted at, him he feared as long as he felt him near, He didn't dare pronounce his oracle, not a murmur. The false gods are terrified of our martyrs. Unholy Julian got worked up, lost his temper, and shouted, "Raise him, carry him out, take him away immediately. This Vivalis, you there, don't you hear? Get on Apollo's nerves, grab him, raise him at once. Dig him out, take him away. Throw him out, take him wherever you want. This isn't a joke. Apollo said the temple has to be purified." We took it, the holy relic, and carried it elsewhere. We took it and carried it away in love and in honor. And hasn't the temple done brilliantly since? In no time at all, a colossal fire broke out, a temple fire. Terrible fire. And both the temple and Apollo burned to nothing. Ashes that I told dirt to be swept away. Julian exploded. He spread it around. What else could he do? That we, the Christians, had set the fire. Let him say so. It hasn't been proved. Let him say so. The essential thing is he exploded. And that's the last poem. If you make it to this point, thank you and have a good rest of your day.